Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm going to continue the series What If Naruto Had an Unexpected Harem Part 2. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Following the battle on the bridge, the group ventured back to Tazuna's house with Zabuza in tow. After arriving, Asuma left to check on Kurobi and Marco to make sure they were still bound and restrained. The others, meanwhile, sat around the dining table and didn't say a word. At the moment, Zabuza and Naruto were considering Haku. While Zabuza was thinking back on his past with his apprentice, Naruto was considering how Haku had saved Naruto and how he had given the poor man his life in gratitude. It was extremely bothersome to him and didn't sit well with him. The young blonde gave Naruto a quick glance out of the corner of his eye before letting out a sorrowful sigh and putting his head on his table arms. This is terrible. The entire mission has been far too chaotic. After Kurobi, Marco, and now this, all I want is to go home and sleep for a very long time. Naruto noticed her brother glancing at her and gave him a gentle smile. Her younger brother, who was depressed, was not much affected by the comforting smile. She reached over and gave his hands a light pat while frowning inwardly. It'll be okay, Naru-kun. This mission has been hard on all of us. Well, almost all of us. When we get back, we'll talk with Ka-chan and our friends. It might help to talk to them about everything that's happened. Uzumaki Namikaze, a young man, nodded his head and sighed. Yeah. He sighed once more, got up from the chair, and turned his head away. Feeling too ashamed of himself for everything that had happened so far, the young man left the house without turning to face Naruto. I think I'm just going to go outside and go for a short walk. I don't really feel well right now. Soon after, Asuma went downstairs and shook his head. The smoking Sarutobi looked at the others, shook his head, and grinned. I sure hope you'll be okay. This mission has taken a lot out of the poor kid. Anyways, how are you holding up, Naruto? Feeling any better? Slowly, Naruto nodded while glancing down at her hands. Yeah, my wounds weren't that bad, and they're healing fine, but I think this mission has affected us. Kurobi-sensei has never liked my Otuto, and he's one of the few people who doesn't trust him. My brother's innermost feelings have caused him to face prejudice, and Kurobi took it to a whole new level this time, which I never expected. And Marco? I'm not sure what we're going to do when we return. I'm okay working with Rihashi-san, but not those two. However, Asuma-sensei, Kurobi-sensei has a lot of influence with the council. I'm actually a little concerned about what might happen. I hope your father, Hokage-sama, can help us. I can't trust Marco or Kurobi anymore because they went too far this time. Nevertheless, despite everything, my brother is the person I'm most concerned about because he took his first lives on this mission and he's blaming himself for everything that has happened to me on this mission. I'm not sure what I can do to help him. Naruto sighed once more, laid her head down, and closed her eyes. I'm worried about my Otuto Asuma-sensei. I'm really worried. Asuma nodded, but he didn't say anything else. Naruto and Asuma turned to Zabuza as he said, the kid'll be just fine, girl. The Gaki's determined, fierce, strong, and both nodded slowly. With a shrug, the swordsman glanced between them. Zabuza nodded his head and only looked at Tsunami as she brought them dinner. Give it time. If you need to, help the Gaki through whatever slump he might be in right now. He's a good kid. Reminds me a lot of Haku. I can understand why Haku put his trust in him the way he did. The swordsman thanked her and pulled his mask down far enough to eat. Tsunami smiled at the group in front of her, nodded her head, and left to return to the kitchen while humming a simple little song to herself. I'm sure that he just needs to take some time and think things through. When he returns, tell him that I'll have something prepared for him. That young man does need to eat after all. Back at the table, the others sighed and made the decision to try to lighten the atmosphere a bit by starting a simple conversation. In the meantime, in the forest, Naruto heard a nearby rustle and halted his progress. The blonde surveyed his surroundings and readied himself for battle, clutching the hilt of his nodashi. But he was surprised when a buxom, silver-haired woman entered the clearing where he was and gazed serenely into his deep blue eyes. He let go of his sword and examined her from head to toe, blushing slightly at the amount of cleavage she displayed. He sighed and shook his head, looking down at her feet. Ma'am, what are you doing way out here? For all you know, it could actually be dangerous out here. The Shinigami shook her head and giggled. Slowly, step by step, the woman came toward him and extended one hand. She knelt down to be at eye level with him and gave him a gentle pat on the top of his head. Silver-haired Shinigami giggled again at the young man's shocked expression. Silly young Naruto, Do not worry so much. I am a friend, and I have been waiting for a long time to meet you personally. She nodded and gestured to his Shi no Tachi. I am the one who asked your mother to give you that sword. You may call me Yer if you'd like. Naruto nodded slowly while gazing into her stunning sapphire-colored eye. He felt calm around her, but there was also something about her that made him shiver. His eyes widened, and she shook her head and grinned softly. Yes, Naruto-kun, I knew about the sword's abilities when I gave it to you. It's a blade I created myself. Naruto-kun, I am the Shinigami. No, I cannot simply bring back the dead. Things do not work that way. As for the blade, the souls you take into it will empower the blade and allow you to call on unique abilities once belonging to those you've killed with it. But you should know that the soul will eventually diminish and return to my realm where it belongs. Use the abilities wisely, take only the souls of those that truly threaten you or your loved ones, and be careful. Okay, sweet, little Naruto-kun. After giving a slow nod, the blonde Jinchuriki looked down at his soul-stealing blade. Can you take the souls of those that are of no use to me and the ones that I do not want? Gato and his men aren't going to be of any help to me, and I'd rather not let them tarnish this blade. But, Haku, please let him stay. He gave himself to keep my sister safe, and I'd rather not let his soul go to waste. He was a good man, he was. If I could use Haku's abilities to protect the person closest to him and the people I care about most, I will do so. But, I don't really know enough about this blade. Please, teach me Shinigami-sama. Prostrated himself before the god and awaited his reply. With a gentle sigh, Yer placed both hands on the boy's shoulders and made him stand up once more. She leaned over to give him a gentle smile and a forehead kiss. Naruto-kun, I told you to call me Yer. There is no need for you to refer to me as Shinigami-sama. As I said, I want to be your friend. Now, follow me and I will teach you what I can for now. As time goes on, I will train you further in the use of this blade and your other swords as well. There is still so much for you to learn, and so little time. I cannot be around all the time, as I am kept rather busy, but I will do what I can, young one. Naruto replied with a nod and left with Yer to teach him. After 2 weeks, Konoha, most of the group had found the remainder of their time in Weeb to be rather boring. None of Naruto's friends were ever able to track him down because he kept vanishing to train with Yer. In order to train Naruto in peace and without any unnecessary disruptions, Yer took care to keep the two of them well hidden with her abilities. The blonde genin was always with Naruto and or his teammates when he wasn't training. Actually, Naruto stayed as close to Naruto as she could for the majority of their time together. Recent events appear to have shaken her up more than she would have liked to acknowledge. As it was, Marco and Kurobi were bound together with strong chakra thread, preventing them from using any of their chakra in an attempt to break free using jutsu or sheer, brute force, while Team 10 and their allies stood at the gates to Konoha. Asuma simply told the gate guards that he would explain it to the Hokage and the Hokage alone when they were asked why 2 of their own were gagged and bound in that way. The gate guards simply waved them through, assuming that whatever had happened was something significant, and told them to report to the Hokage right away. Asuma turned to Naruto as soon as she entered the village and gave her a gentle smile. The Jonin laughed quietly to himself as he watched Naruto kiss her brother's cheek before bidding everyone farewell. You've had a difficult time, Naruto-chan. We'll take care of things from here. I want you to go home and talk to your mother. Feel free to explain to her everything that happened on the mission, and inform her that she is free to come join the meeting with the old man. I'm sure she'll have a few choice words to say on the matter. In fact, I have a feeling she'll try to dole out the punishment these two deserve herself. The group carried on after she left and disappeared from view. Naruto was abruptly tackled from behind as they got closer to the Hokage Tower, which was only a few dozen steps away at this point. Naruto blinked a few times in surprise as he spun around in his opponent's grasp, almost collapsing under the weight of his attacker, Ino-chan. Hi there. What's up? Ino stabbed her boyfriend in the forehead while returning the stare. What's up, as I've been worried sick about you. I heard from your mother that you'd be gone for a whole month on a C-rank mission. I missed you a lot. Being stuck on a team with Kiba of all people rather than getting to spend time with you, Naruto-kun, is absolutely horrible. He's so rude all the time, and he never says anything good about any of us, and he loves to taunt me for being your girlfriend. It's just one thing after another with him. Kurenai-sensei's tried some genjutsu on the idiot, but dog breath never learns his lesson. The platinum-haired woman breathed deeply, wrapped her arms around her boyfriend. So, are you okay, Naru sweetie? Naruto flushed when he heard Asuma and Zabuza, his teammates, snickering. When Naruto gave him a rather nasty glare in return, Zabuza grinned at him and laughed to himself, saying, "Ah, I didn't know the Gaki was getting it on with somebody other than his sister. How cute." The missing nin gave Kurobi a good, hard kick to the back of his knee and watched him collapse, laughing gleefully to himself. "Relax, Gaki, I'm just giving you a hard time. Do try to remember that we're in a hurry though. These two need to be dealt with after all. Ah, doling out a little bit of my kind of punishment. They should really let me handle these two. I'd make them both suffer hell for what they tried to do." After a few moments of glancing between her beloved Naruto and the odd but menacing man, Ino finally took a step back and fixed Naruto with a direct gaze. "Okay, what happened? You have some serious explaining to do, Naruto. I won't take no for an answer either." The young, blonde man shook his head and sighed. Naruto kissed Ino's lips tenderly before leaving, following his teammates and the others into the Hokage tower. "Not right now, Ino-koi. If you need to know the details immediately, head to my home and speak with Naruto. We need to go see the Hokage now. It's really quite important that we deal with this swiftly and as painlessly as possible. We're already getting questioning looks from other shinobi. Please, I'll tell you everything later if you'd rather hear it from me. Bye. There's a serious problem here. I'll go see Naruto if he demands it. She seems to have had a difficult time." Ino scowled at that, shook her head, and hurried off toward Naruto's house. Tower of Hokage. With a heavy sigh, Hiruzen sat in his chair and gazed at his son. "I'm not going to like this, am I?" The Sandaime Hokage grabbed his pipe, lit it, and took a few puffs after Asuma gave him a simple shake of the head to indicate that he answered. "No, let me hear the report. Judging from the looks of things, the mission was successful and you even brought back a, guest. You don't appear to be a prisoner, but as for what purpose you have been brought before me, Zabuza Momochi, I admit that I am a bit perplexed. Please Team 10, explain what happened." With a sigh, Asuma gave a solemn nod. He shook his head and grinned slightly as he looked into his father's face. His father nodded, and Asuma took that as permission to go on. "This might be a long story, but you remember receiving our letter shortly after we left, do you not?" Asuma asked. "After that, we met up with Kurobi-sensei's team and proceeded to continue our escort of the bridge builder to his home in Weeb. As we suspected, we were again attacked, this time by none other than Zabuza Momochi himself." Zabuza gave another smirk and nodded behind the Sarutobi. Zabuza shrugged and looked around the room for a moment before Shino spoke up to continue the story. "It was a good fight, I'll give you that much. As Team 10 here can tell you, I was defeated and forced to retreat. While I took some time to recuperate, it would seem this team underwent some training. The next I saw of them, they were each much stronger than our first battle. I must say I was rather impressed for the most part." Shino scowled and nodded his head as he gave the Hokage a quick glance behind his sunglasses. "During our first battle with Zabuza, Kurobi-sensei and his pupil, Marco, attempted to kill Naruto-san. As you can see, the attempt on his life failed. Sadly, this isn't the worst of what happened. After the battle, when we arrived at Tazuna's home, Kurobi proceeded to antagonize Naruto-san and made the situation worse. As a result of their behavior and conduct during the mission thus far, both Kurobi and Marco were hence put under house arrest, so to speak. They were monitored throughout the day, with at least one person watching both of them at every second." Shino raised a hand and shook his head, observing the expression on the Hokage's face. When Hiruzen nodded for Shino to continue, Shino nodded back, saying, "Please Hokage-sama, before you speak, allow me to finish. It's important that we finish relaying to you our report so you understand the entirety of the situation." At this point, Shino looked to Naruto and nodded his head for his teammate to continue the report. "As Zabuza stated, we received training while monitoring these two. However, at one point, a few days after arriving at Tazuna's house, Marco escaped our watch." Naruto sighed, wishing he didn't have to tell his grandfather figure such unsettling information. The blonde felt a comforting hand on his shoulder and nodded, letting out a sorrowful sigh. "It's what happened at that point is just horrible, Gigi. Naruto-chan and I had been sleeping peacefully among the trees in the woods that morning, exhausted from our night training, when I woke up to find my body paralyzed by ceiling tags. Marco had attacked my sister, knocked her away from her swords, overpowered her in her still weakened state, and Marco attempted to rape Naruto-chan, Gigi. He attempted to rape her, and after Haku, we'll explain more about Haku in a bit, I promise. Well, after Haku showed up and distracted him, I lost myself. I was so angry, and all I remember of that exact moment is seeing red. I tried to kill that bastard for hurting Naruto-chan. I would have succeeded to had Kurobi Teme and Asuma-sensei stopped me. Hey, instead of trying to punish his pupil, Kurobi had the gall to lecture me, accuse me of attacking an innocent, a fellow Konoha shinobi, all that crap. Here, Choji took over. After that, we proceeded to tie Kurobi and Marco up and kept them tied up at Tazuna's house so they couldn't pull anything else. At first, we had decided it would be a good idea to keep them available for the upcoming battle, but with everything they had tried, it was clear they couldn't be trusted to so much as cooperate with us. Still, we managed to win the battle on the bridge, though it wasn't easy. Naruto and Naruko fought with Haku, Zabuza's pupil by the way, and managed to kill him. After that, Naruto saved Zabuza from a killing blow that Asuma-sensei would have dealt. After that, Gato appeared with a bunch of mercenaries, but at this point, everyone's eyes were on Naruto, and the blonde felt like he was shrinking into himself, much like a turtle would pull its arms, head, and legs back into its shell to avoid danger. Naruto sighed deeply once more before speaking. I used a sword bestowed upon me by somebody really special. It's called the Shi no Tachi and, well, as I killed everyone in my way and then Gato himself, my sword absorbed their souls. Please don't ask, and please don't ask me to relinquish this blade. It's not an evil blade, I assure you. I've also been trained by the person who made it to use it effectively. It's more of a last-ditch effort weapon because of its abilities, but it's capable and I'm learning fast. As for the other mercenaries I didn't kill, Asuma-sensei dealt with them. I was too worried about my sister to truly care either way. I'm just glad she's all right after everything that's happened. Hiruzen then nodded his head in Zabuza's direction, sensing that the report was complete. If that is all for your report, would you mind explaining Zabuza's presence here? With a sigh, Asuma nodded back. It's due to a promise that Naruto here made to Haku prior to the boy's death. Essentially, it was something along the lines of, look after Zabuza and give him a place to call home. Or something along those lines. Essentially, make sure Zabuza stays well. With a sigh, Asuma turned to Naruto, hear him nod. Yep, looks like that's about it for that explanation. So what do you say, Pops? Can you give Zabuza a place here in Konoha as one of our own? With a sigh, Hiruzen took off his hat with one hand and set it on his desk. He ruffled his hair a little and then hung his head, that hand now free. Yes, though Zabuza will have to undergo questioning and have to prove himself. His skills aren't in question here, it's whether or not he'll be loyal to the village and fight to defend both it and its people. Zabuza, do you agree to be tested? If so, I ask that you remain behind once we are done here so we can discuss the details of what we'll need to do. The Sandaime Hokage nodded in response to Zabuza's nod before turning to face Kurobi and Marco. The old man narrowed his eyes and started talking. Hiruzen glanced at the blonde genin and grinned slightly before nodding his head again. As for these two, I'm calling the council together for a meeting. Team 10, I ask that you be there. Naruko and her fellow teammates should come as well. Marco and Kurobi are going to be put before the council and judged for their crimes. Naruto, he said. Bring your mother. I'm sure she'd love to be there when their sentences are passed down. In fact, I'm more than certain Kushina would love to enact her own brand of punishment upon these two. The Hokage turned to one of his Anbu after dismissing Team 10 and the lone member of Naruko's team who wasn't currently bound while observing everyone nod. The Hokage smirked at the expressions on Kurobi's and Marco's faces as they were led from the room. Take these two away, have Anko look after them. Tell her that she's free to play a little. The Sandaime put on his hat again and grinned as he turned to face Zabuza. Take a seat, Zabuza, this may take a while. At the Uzumaki Namikaze estate earlier, Naruko had been interrupted while delivering the news to her mother. She hadn't even been able to fully explain what had happened with Marco and Kurobi, let alone tell her what had happened on the bridge. Kushina actually let out a loud, irate scream, saying, they did WHAAT. Why'll kill those bastards, and so on, and so forth. At the moment, the irate, red-headed mother was ranting about what she would do to the two of them and how agonizing their deaths would be. Only when they started to hear knocking on their front door did the irate mother stop. Naruko approached the door, opened it slowly, and blinked briefly upon noticing Sakura and Ino standing in the doorway. Ino? Sakura? What brings you two here, if you're looking for Naruto? Before Ino spoke, Sakura and Ino shook their heads. As soon as Naruko nodded and stepped back, Ino and Sakura entered the room and sat down on either side of the couch. May we come in? Naruto told me that I should come and see you. Our boyfriend wouldn't tell me what was going on, but it's obvious something happened. He'd like us to be here for you. Judging from Kushina-sama's screaming earlier, I assume it's really, really bad. After they did, Kushina at last relaxed and gave the girls a gentle smile before hurriedly preparing some tea. She put tea on the table for each of the girls when she eventually got back, then sat back in a chair close to them and sighed while silently drinking her own cup of tea. It's good to see you girls. Right now, I think we could use the company. I'm sorry Naruto sweetie, but could you please start over from the beginning and explain what happened? I can deal with those two brutes later, but right now I want to hear the rest of the story. After giving a slow nod, Naruto turned to face Sakura and Ino. The redhead shook her head, glanced at her mother, and then looked down again. This might not be easy to hear for the two of you, and I promise that as I go on with the details of the mission, both of you. The young woman wrapped her arms around herself and started to shiver, but Sakura and Ino put down their teacups and gave her a warm, three-person hug instead. Excuse me. The three of you will like it less and less. The entire mission was bad. So very, very bad. Naruto calmed down, grinned at the girls, and inhaled deeply before exhaling slowly. Thank you. Both of you. Naruto nodded slowly, returned her teacup to her hands after it had been taken away when she started to shake, and started to share her story. It began when my team was called in to assist Naruto-kun's team. They had taken on what was supposed to be a C-rank mission, but it turned out to be much more than it first seemed. The bridge builder, Tazuna, had apparently lied about the mission details. The enemy was Gato Corporation. As such, Gato had the money to hire almost whomever he wanted to get rid of the bridge builder. Please, don't ask me to explain Ino, Sakura. I don't feel up to it right now. The girls nodded sympathetically and encouraged her to go on when she was ready. On our way, as we were escorting Tazuna to his home in Weeb, we were attacked by the missing nin, Zabuza Momochi. As if that wasn't bad enough, during our fight, my Jonin-sensei, Kurobi, and my teammate, Marco, they tried to kill Naruto-kun during the battle and make it look as if it was Zabuza's doing. At their dismayed expressions, Naruto gave a smile and raised her head. As you already know, they didn't succeed. But it was a terrible act regardless. Naruto's story continued until she reached the part that most troubled her, after which she went on to explain what happened at Tazuna's house, how they forced Zabuza to escape with Hiku, and more. Her mother came over and gave her a strong hug when she started crying. Take your time sweetheart, girls, Kushina said, scowling as he glanced between Sakura and Ino. This is the part that really got me here. After she told me about what happened at this point in the mission, I lost it. It's a good thing you two came when you did, or I would have gone straight to the Hokage and demanded that he let me take their heads. Naruto grinned a little at that and nearly burst out laughing at the looks on Sakura's and Ino's faces. The morning after Naruto and I had that intense training session together, I awoke to my Oto-Oto's screams. Marco had somehow slipped away from Tazuna's and had found us in the woods, sleeping under a tree together. The bastard slapped paralysis tags on Naruto and then proceeded to assault me. I couldn't even muster up the strength to fight back, I was still so exhausted from the night before. Marco, he tried to rape me. This final sentence was barely audible because she was so traumatized by the incident. Nevertheless, the girls turned pale when they heard her. They gave her a firm hug right away and started asking her questions non-stop. Were you alright? Did somebody save you too? What happened then? Tell us, was a flurry of inquiries, interspersed with thoughtful remarks and inquiries in calming, gentle tones. To be sure, it was a strange experience. There. It'll be okay Naruto-chan, it will. How could that monster do such a thing? Women aren't tools for men's amusement. That's just so wrong. Please tell me you're okay? Naruto nodded slowly and gave everyone a gentle smile when she was finally able to speak. I'm okay. A kind young man, a boy around my age, came into the clearing and distracted Marco. He threatened her and tried to keep going. I can still feel his grubby hands on my breasts. I washed out my mouth in an attempt to get that horrible taste out, but it still haunts me. It was horrible. Absolutely horrible. Shaking once more, Naruto settled down and drank some of her tea. In fact, she sipped the majority of her tea before continuing her story. Naruto broke free of the paralysis and attacked Marco. Oto-Oto was prepared to kill him, I could see it in his eyes. But Naruto wasn't quite himself at that moment in time. You two already know what Naruto-kun carries inside of him. He's a Jinchuriki, and at that moment, he was under the Kyuubi's influence. However, I didn't care. I just wanted him to succeed. I wanted him to kill Marco for what he had just done. But then Kurobi attacked Naruto. Naruto sighed and shook her head at the frowns on their faces. Naruto shook her head once more, drained her tea, and leaned back, covering her face with her hands. Kurobe defended Marco's actions. Even had the nerve to say that he was only there to wake us for breakfast. Bastard. She inhaled deeply, then lowered her hands and encircled her chest with her arms. After that, we tied the two of them up and made sure they couldn't do anything more for the rest of the mission. She shook her head and frowned even more. Naruto sighed as he looked around at the faces of the three women. The battle on the bridge, the second time we faced Zabuza, he brought his pupil with him. Haku. Naruto nodded and gave a slight shoulder shrug. Yes, the same young man that helped me. Naruto and I fought Haku while Asuma-sensei fought Zabuza. But, Haku defeated me. I fell unconscious, and I don't quite know what exactly took place afterwards. I was told the details later, but I never witnessed them. Ino cautiously inquired, unsure of what was appropriate to ask and what wasn't. What did they tell you happened, Naruko-chan? The platinum blonde felt herself squirming at the sight of Naruto turning to face her with a gentle smile. I assume that this is also bad, she muttered to herself. Naruto killed Haku using his new sword, the Shi no Tachi as it's called. But more than that, this sword absorbed his soul. But, Naruto made Haku a promise before he died that he would look after Zabuza. That's why Zabuza is alive, because Naruto saved him from Asuma-sensei's finishing blow. It's why Zabuza now seeks to become a shinobi of Konoha. In fact, it looks like Zabuza has taken a liking to my Otuto. I wouldn't be surprised if he asks for permission to help train him. The others, particularly Kushina, appeared shocked by this but remained silent. She smiled slightly as she looked at her mother, and the two embraced without saying anything more. Now that we're back in Konoha, Asuma assures me that both Marco and Kurobe will be held accountable for their actions during the mission, but instead of forcing me to stand before the Hokage, in the same room as those two, he sent me home to be with Yuka-san. About 5 minutes later, someone knocked on the door, interrupting them. They all turned at the sound and saw Naruto opening his house and silently shutting the door behind him as he took in the scene. Hi Ka-san, Ino-chan, Sakura-chan, Naruto-chan, I'm home. Afterwards, in the council chambers at the moment, Marco and Kurobe stood in the middle of the room, gazing up at the council members who had so far shown up. They paid little attention to the additional people still cramming into their seats. The Uzumaki Namakazes, Asuma, the rest of Team 10, and their lone teammate, Rihashi, were behind them, waiting to be called upon. He appeared unconcerned as usual, as though he had no opinion about the current state of affairs. The Sandaime Hokage started talking after everyone had sat down, grabbing everyone's attention. The council members gestured to the two standing beneath them and started chatting among themselves, saying, I have called you here today to discuss the betrayal of two Konoha shinobi. A Jonin sensei and his genin student, Kurobe and Marco. Hiruzen soon silenced them and resumed his conversation. I sent Kurobe's team of genin to assist Team 10, consisting of Jonin sensei Asuma Sarutobi, and his genin squad of Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, Choji Akamichi, and Shino Aburame. Their mission was meant to be a simple one. Just escort a bridge builder to his home in Wave and guard him while he and his crew of builders finished constructing a bridge to connect Wave to the mainland. However, the mission details were falsified and things turned out to be much tougher than they were meant to be. Under the circumstances, I would say that the teams did an exceptional job against unbelievable odds. Hiruzen nodded his head in appreciation of their efforts, with the exception of Kurobe and Marco, of course. He then looked around the room and heard compliments aimed at the teams and individuals involved. In order to continue speaking, he raised his hand and once more silenced the room. Hearing the gasps, Hiruzen glanced down at Naruto and gestured for him to come forward. Unfortunately, the mission quickly took a turn for the worse after Kurobe's team joined Team 10. When the teams were confronted by none other than Zabuza Momochi, ex-Kiri swordsman of the Mist, Kurobe and Marco took that moment to try and kill one of their own. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was their intended victim. Naruto and Kushina went outside to stand by Naruto's side. The trio took a quick look at the council members. They all appeared to be preoccupied with debating the charges against the traitors. Danzo finally moved forward and gave Naruto a glare. Naruto simply squeezed his sister's hand as Kushina narrowed her eyes and gazed up at him, both of them looking to each other for solace. Do you have any evidence to back these claims of attempted assassination? Or is this all just hearsay and your own grudges against these two speaking for you? The rest of Team 10 then came forward, with Shino leading the way as they joined Naruto and his family. I happened to overhear the plan earlier, before the battle even began. In fact, a few of us were actually witness to Marco's attempt on Naruto's life. I intervened and stopped him, and aside from that, Kurobi actually admitted to the orders later on after we had delivered the bridge builder to safety in his own home. Do you need any more proof than that, Danzo-sama? Without saying another word, Danzo nodded and took a step back. Then Hiruzen started talking again. According to the report given to me Team 10, they put Marco and Kurobi under house arrest and kept a close eye on them at all times. However, at one point, days after arriving in Weeb, Marco managed to slip away early in the morning. At this point, he found Naruto and Naruto laying, resting peacefully in the woods after a sparring session, it would seem. He restrained Naruto and proceeded to assault young Naruto. It proceeded to the point where he even attempted to rape the lass. They all nodded at him to go on, looking down at the Uzumaki Namikazes for approval to discuss what would happen next. The Sandaime sighed and scratched his beard in exasperation before continuing. It was at this point that Naruto harnessed some of the Kyuubi's chakra to break free of his restraints and proceeded to attack, and nearly kill, Marco. Kurobi then appeared on the scene with Asuma and attacked Naruto, proceeding to then accuse him of attacking an innocent. There were witnesses to testify to the attack and attempted rape, so whatever claims Kurobi might make in this room, pay them no heed. Hiruzen went on after noticing that everyone was nodding in agreement. Nodding to the guards to take off the gags that were keeping the treacherous pair from speaking, everyone watched and waited to see what they would have to say. The issue now comes down to what we should do about these two. Firstly, let us hear from the two traitors and hear what they have to say in their defense. Being the conceited little monster that he was, Marco was the first to speak. I was well within my rights as a Konoha shinobi to destroy any threat to the village, even if it comes from within. For starters, this monster that you all seem to love so much, he carries a monster inside him, and he even showed himself to be a monster during this mission. He let the Kyuubi take over and even tried to take my life when I was simply trying to make sure my teammate was okay. After briefly gazing at the Uzumaki Namikazes, a slight smirk at them, Marco resumed his lies, looking back up at the council members. Aside from that, that beast is responsible for holding my team back from participating in previous Chunin exams. There is no reason for me to be held back again on account of this garbage. Answer me this. What would any of you do should a monster such as this one prevent you from achieving your dreams? My teammates and I could be well on our way to Jonin rank already were it not for him. He's holding us back and he deserves punishment for such action. After giving the boy a fierce look, Kushina turned to face the Sandaime. Sandaime-sama, I ask that you allow me to cut this maggot down where he stands. Not only does he spew such obvious lies, but he belittles my son, blames him for something he had no control over, and even goes so far as to speak of the Kyuubi. We all know my son isn't the monster this worm claims him to be. Please, allow me to carry out the punishment befitting of the true monsters here. The Sandaime Hokage held up his hand and gave a brief shake of his head. Kushina almost growled at this, but she took a step back and put a soft, warm hand on her son's shoulder. Patience, Kushina-san, patience. Kurobi, speak and share your side of things with the council. She leaned over and whispered in his ear. Don't worry, sweetie, everything will work out somehow. I promise. You'll be okay. After a brief moment of staring at Marco and shaking his head, Kurobi turned to face the Sandaime. Marco deserves none of the punishment for what transpired. As his Jonin sensei, I am responsible for his actions. Besides that, as was mentioned previously, he acted per my orders. Inoichi interrupted Kurobi at this point, seemingly having something to say about this assertion. So you're saying that you ordered him to rape Naruto in front of her brother? What could this possibly have accomplished for you other than emotionally scarring both of them and keeping them out of commission for the rest of the mission? Everyone turned to Kurobi for his response, nodding in agreement with his point. With an inaudible sigh, the Jonin looked down at his genin pupil before returning his gaze to the Hokage's eyes. I make no excuses. As I said before, I am responsible for his actions and will therefore take punishment for the both of us. He is still a child and has not even been allowed to participate in the Chunin exams. At least give him the privilege of participating alongside his teammates. If you revoke his ninja status now, how would his fellow teammates get the chance to participate? Think of them, Sandaime-sama, council members, and then make your judgment. Would you punish Naruto and Rihashi for the mistakes of their teammate and foolish sensei? By this time, Kushina was clearly trembling. Considering everything that little bastard has done, the council can't possibly consider letting him get away with it, can they? I promise that if they do, I will immediately murder anyone who believes him to be innocent. It was clear from the expressions on everyone's faces what the Shinobi Council would do. They were never going to comply with Kurobi's demands. Hiruzen's expression made it clear that he disagreed and supported the Uzumaki Namikazes during this ordeal. Thus, it ultimately came down to Danzo, Himura, Kaharu, and the Civilian Council. Unfortunately, some Civilian Council members were genuinely opposed to Naruto, supporting Marco's argument that Naruto posed a threat to the village and should be punished immediately by God. But he had the support of most of the Civilian Council. After all, they greatly respected Naruto and his family, and he was a sweet boy. But before they could issue their formal decision, Danzo intervened on behalf of Kaharu, Homura, and himself. I propose an alternate solution to this particular ordeal. It is clear to everyone here that dear Naruko would not be willing to work any longer with her corrupt teammate. But you do have a point, Kurobi. These were your orders and you are responsible for the actions of your students. After all, the actions of the students reflect upon the teacher, do they not? After receiving a few nods in response, Danzo laughed and carried on. Therefore, if everyone is in agreement, I say we allow Naruko's and Naruto's mother to enact a swift execution upon Kurobi for his actions during this mission. He is a clear traitor to the village and deserves no less. Am I correct in judging this, so Hokage-sama? Danzo smirked inwardly as he looked into Hiruzen's eyes before turning to Kushina. The whole room watched as Kushina pulled out her blade, took a few slow steps toward Kurobi, and then vanished. It would seem we are all in agreement. Go on and deliver your vengeance upon him, Kushina-san. It is clear you've waited long enough for this. Kurobi's eyes rolled into the back of his head as she reappeared, standing exactly where she had been, and pieces of him started to fall to the ground. Before they could continue discussing what to do about Marco, the Hokage ordered that the rather unpleasant scene be cleaned up. After the mess had been cleaned up and the room had finally calmed down again, about 10 minutes later, Danzo turned back to Marco and smiled. As I mentioned previously, Marco will no longer be welcome on his current team. Instead, I propose we take him from his current team and put him on a team with 2 individuals of my choosing. He will take place in the Chunin exams as a member of this alternate team, while Naruko and Rihashi will join with a new teammate of your choosing, Hokage-sama. Does this sound like a fair judgment? The Sandaime rubbed the bridge of his nose and sighed. Yes, it did sound like a pretty good choice, but he was aware that Kushina would never consent to such a thing. He looked at Kushina and the other Uzumakis and sighed deeply once more. If the council agrees to this, I might as well too. However, I will need a bit of time to find another Jonin-sensei for this team, not to mention a new genin to replace Marco. Kushina, Naruto, Naruko, what do you say to this? Rihashi stepped forward and met the Hokage's eyes before any of them could say anything. If I may? The genin asked, getting a nod in return. Then, after glancing at Marco, he addressed the Hokage. I rarely choose to offer my 2 cents, but in this case I think it would be appropriate. As a member of this team, I believe we clearly need to be a cohesive unit. We need to work as one and support one another. Marco has never strived towards this goal. Removing him from the team or killing him, I care not, but I think it would be a wise decision to keep him out of the next Chunin exams should he be permitted to live. Think of it as punishment for his actions on this mission if you will. However, if you do permit him to participate, there should be some countermeasures in place to prevent him from seeking out Naruto and or Naruko in an attempt to do them harm. I'm sure Shinobi is smart as those on this council, not to mention you, Hokage-sama and Danzo-sama, could come up with such a measure. In fact, if you were able to do this, perhaps Kushina-sama, Naruto-san, and Naruko-san might be more accepting of this proposal of yours, Danzo-sama? Seeing logic in what Rihashi had just said, everyone nodded and turned to watch Kushina, Naruto, and Naruko to see how they would react. They talked about it in private, and Kushina nodded and sighed, though they seemed less than eager to accept such a dubious arrangement. Kushina turned to Marco and smirked evilly, pointing her sword at his face. The important thing is making sure my children stay safe from this cretin. Personally, I'd still prefer to kill the wretch where he stands, but it seems I am outvoted in this case. In the upcoming Chunin exams, you'd best stay far away from my children. Because if I hear these countermeasures fail and you've harmed either one of my babies, I'll be coming for you, Marco. And when I find you, I'll do far, far worse to you than what your precious sensei received. Understand? After delivering her threat, Kushina glared at the council members, Danzo, and the Hokage. The head of the Uzumaki Namikaze clan grabbed her children's hands and walked out of the council chambers, saying, "You'd better do something smart." She was followed by Team 10. Marco and Rihashi were the only ones who remained because they wanted to know if the Hokage would choose a different team for Naruko and himself after the meeting was over. Later that evening, the 3 Uzumakis left the council meeting and came home. They were worn out, irritated, and generally extremely dissatisfied with the outcome of that meeting. Naruto looked into his mother's face while he scratched at his cheek. Well, that didn't turn out quite like I had hoped. After receiving a nod and a sigh from her son, Kushina opened the front door and entered with her family. They noticed someone sleeping soundly on their couch with his legs spread out as they turned on the lights. The man was currently snoring loudly and had a rather large weapon by his side. One was hanging over the top of the couch, and the other was on the floor. The red hot-blooded habanero, who was more incensed at this display than the invasion of her home, made the decision to use a different type of weapon instead of splattering this man's blood on her couch. The mother took a frying pan from the kitchen and started to walk quietly in the direction of the man while her kids looked on in confusion. They both knew immediately who this man was. It was difficult not to, given his appearance and the weapon at his side. Leaning close to her Otuto, Naruto whispered softly. Naruto merely chuckled quietly as they both went back to observing their mother. This should be good. Ka-san's going to put Zabuza-san in his place nice and quick at this rate. With a loud crack, Zabuza rolled off the couch and hit the floor, clutching at his face and yelling numerous curses at the top of his lungs. Kushina developed a devilish smirk as she raised her weapon high and brought it down upon the stranger's head. The man lifted his hand and waved it wildly as Kushina attempted to strike him once more for having the audacity to curse in front of her kids. Damn it, woman. Enough of that. Once was more than enough. The swordsman groaned as he stood up and turned to face Kushina's two kids. He knelt down in front of the two and pointed at his face while slipping past the irate mother. He snickered in response to the question, "Is my face still intact after that? What the hell was she even thinking anyways?" And then started patting his face, expecting to find his nose stuck under his left eye or something similar. He scowled and gave them a low growl when they only made fun of this. "What's so funny, brats?" Naruto laughed and gave the elderly man a shoulder pat. At this point, the siblings started snarling in rage and laughing louder. "Zabuza-san, meet our Ka-san, Kushina Uzumaki. Ka-san, this is Zabuza. He's the guy we beat up on our mission." The swordsman shook his head and stood up, facing Kushina, after receiving two nods in response. "Who beat up whom now? I'll have you brats know I didn't lose to you too. I lost to your sensei, that Asuma guy. You're just trying to make me look bad now, aren't you?" he asked. "Before I explain the situation, would you mind relinquishing hold of your weapon, ma'am? I don't trust you anywhere near me with that thing in your hands." Kushina flashed an overly charming smile as her eye twitched. The man started searching for a way out as she slowly started approaching him, wondering what in the world he had done to offend her this time. Kushina leaned close to him and whispered in his ear when she got there. The mother then struck him with the frying pan once more, sending the swordsman to the ground with blood dripping from his fresh wounds onto her carpet. "Don't call me, ma'am. Do I look old enough for a title such as that?" she said. The woman snarled at this and was about to strike him once more when her kids seized her arms and took away her weapon. While Naruto went to get cleaning supplies for her mother and some medical supplies to tend to their acquaintance, Naruto grinned at Zabuza and helped him up and over to their couch. "Ka-san. Stop, please. Zabuza-san, are you alright? Can't exactly keep my promise to Haku if my Ka-san kills you for something out of your control. Now, can I? Now, while Ka-san busies herself with the cleaning, tell us all why you broke into our home, okay?" Zabuza shook his head and sighed. Zabuza looked at the child's mother and sighed when he sensed a death glare directed at him. "You're a real smartass, you know that, brat?" he asked. "I'd much rather get myself a nice one-bedroom apartment or something, but the old man seemed to find some amusement in putting me here, and now I understand why. All right, Naruto, whatever. This is all the Sandame's doing. Apparently, you were the one who decided you were responsible for me. I'm going to be living with you from now on." Zabuza rubbed his still sore head and gave Kushina a snarling glare, but she pointed him straight to the kitchen, where he saw the frying pan on the table and started to second-guess his choice. Gomenasai. What a crazy woman. The final sentence was muttered under his breath, but the siblings heard it, and Naruto turned to face her mother with a sinister little grin. "Oh, Ka-san." To everyone's surprise, Zabuza clapped a hand over her mouth and drew her back before Naruto could say another word. He leaned in close and whispered to the two brats. "What on earth are you two attempting to accomplish with me? She's going to kill me, this isn't a game." The demon of the hidden mist leaned back on the couch and moaned, "What the hell have you gotten me into this time, Haku?" As the Uzumaki siblings nodded and started laughing again. Shortly afterward, Kushina approached the man and smirked, saying, I should go straight to the Hokage's office and take this matter up with the old monkey, but since my children so obviously seem to trust you, I have another idea. Zabuza, who didn't like the smirk the fiery redhead had on her face, started to get cold sweats down his back. He nodded slowly to indicate that he was paying attention, and Kushina pulled out a mop from behind her back and smiled, saying, "You're going to be our new maid. We will teach you how to clean if you don't already know. We'll teach you how to cook if you don't already know. There are also a lot of other things you will need to do if you plan to live with us, commencing with. I'm starting to think it would have been better to go with the Sandame's other idea." Zabuza moaned loudly and lowered his head, listening silently to everything the matriarch of the household had to say. Even though the idea of spending time alone with the T&I team doesn't sound all that pleasant, at least I wouldn't have to put up with this shit. Still, that woman in the overcoat was definitely kind of creepy. Noon on the following day. From the beginning of the day, Zabuza had explained his plans for the Gaki, as he preferred to call Naruto, and had started training him for the upcoming Chunin exams. In fact, after learning that he had access to Haku's abilities through his soul-snatching sword, the swordsman had even started to explain to him things about Haku's past and his unique Kekkei Genkei. Of course, Zabuza was initially incensed at the prospect, but he found himself considering the possibilities. He knew that eventually, Haku's soul would be freed from the sword and able to pass on peacefully, but until then, he figured this might be Haku's attempt to further the Gaki's training. While Naruto trained with Kushina and his new private instructor, Naruko stood in the Hokage's office with her only loyal teammate, Rihashi, after they were called to speak with the Hokage in his office. Naturally, everyone who knew the specifics of last night's council meeting assumed that this had to do with finding the two of them a new sensei and a new teammate. Hiruzen had been silent for a long time, studying the documents on his desk, but after what seemed like hours, the old man finally said, "It took me a while, but I think I've found just the right person to lead your team," Naruko said. "It took some consideration to choose your third teammate. The majority of the people I considered were already on an existing team, and there were no recent graduates who could truly match your current skill set. I initially thought of giving you Sasuke Uchiha, but I'd prefer not to take him off of Kakashi Hitaki's team while he's training with him." When the Hokage started talking again, Naruko returned her attention to the subject at hand, nodding in agreement. "After some more thought on the matter, I remembered that we recently received some new shinobi into the village," she said, recalling that she didn't really care for the Uchiha boy anyway because he had too much ego on him, regardless of how his mother tried to fix that particular problem. It was a sort of trade between villages, an effort to foster better relations, if you will, but I think this individual might be a great addition to your team. To our astonishment, when she arrived, we discovered that she is the granddaughter of the current Tsuchikage. She is a kunoichi from Iwagakure. The elderly Hokage nodded at his secretary as she opened the door and let two individuals into the room. A girl who looked to be about Naruko's age, with short black hair and black eyes to match. She wore the traditional Iwagakure Hite-8 on her forehead, but she also wore an armband on her left upper arm that bore the Konohagakure symbol, indicating that she was a part of the recently implemented new system. The kunoichi smiled politely at her new teammates before turning back to Naruko and Rihashi. "So, these are the two I am to join in the Chunin exams then?" "Yes, Kuretsuchi-san," Hiruzen Sarutobi said, nodding his head in agreement and gesturing for her to join them. "I want you to meet Naruko Uzumaki Namikaze and Rihashi. Your new teammates will be these people." "Hokage Dono, you put me on a team with the daughter of that man?" Kuretsuchi's hand went to her kunai pouch, and she narrowed her eyes, giving Naruko a stern look for a few seconds before turning to face the Hokage. "When you made this choice, what were you thinking? Are you unaware of what he did to our village and our nation? We still harbor a great deal of animosity toward that man." Kuretsuchi turned to glare at her new sensei, but she quickly regretted the move as her new sensei narrowed her eyes and sent a bit of killing intent, her way. The woman slowly took the now empty dango stick out of her mouth, smirked down at her, and waved the stick in her face. "Careful girlie," the sensei said, bopping the younger girl over the head with a busty woman wearing an overcoat and mesh bodysuit underneath. "You never know what might happen to you if you keep doing things like that in the village, let alone the Hokage's office. Besides, are you people incapable of letting go of past grievances? Is it really necessary to hold the Yondaime family accountable for a wartime incident? Don't expect me to play nice just because we're on the same team now," Kuretsuchi complained as she took her hand out of her kunai pouch, turned around huffily, and pointed a finger in Naruko's face. "If it weren't for the fact that we're attempting to strengthen ties between the villages, you're the enemy here. Don't you think that's exactly why you were put on a team with little Naruko-chan here?" Anko slapped her over the head again and then stabbed her in the back of her neck with another empty dango stick that had just been cleaned of its delicious morsels. Helping you people get over this resentment is the best way to strengthen the bonds between our villages, isn't it? As she looked to the Hokage for confirmation that that was his true intention, she couldn't help but smile when she noticed him nod his head once to confirm her suspicions. That is correct, Anko-chan. The Hokage turned to face the young granddaughter of the Tsuchikage, grinning kindly and knowingly while nodding his head in comprehension. I understand your worries, young Kuretsuchi-chan, but this is indeed best for both our villages, he said. How can we ever genuinely demonstrate that it is possible to put aside our differences and ultimately find peace if you two are unable to work as a team and serve as role models for both of our villages? Your grandfather would undoubtedly comprehend this choice, wouldn't he? You're right, Kuretsuchi complained, lowering her head and slumping her shoulders in defeat. After a few minutes, she sighed in defeat and reluctantly nodded her head. I was initially apprehensive when Grandpa informed me that I would be sent to Konoha of all places. The elderly man gave me the following explanation when I questioned why he sent me of all people. I understand how this must appear to you, Kuretsuchi. We've been harboring resentment for a long time, and now we're discussing the possibility of peace? Yes, it does seem strange. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but find the concept, for want of a better word, interesting when it was introduced at the most recent Cage Summit. Naturally, I was initially opposed to the idea, but as I started to consider it, I couldn't help but consider the potential. I immediately discarded the first idea, which was, of course, to sneak some of my best genin prospects into Konoha to deal with Namikaze's runts. It would be carried out immediately. How, after all, are two genin supposed to conceal their true motivations? At this point, Kuretsuchi became aware of the attention on her before turning to look at Naruto. Did he really consider having my brother and I killed for a while? What on earth? Kuretsuchi merely gave this a tense laugh before turning to face the Hokage. May I go on? I don't mean to drag this out, but Grandpa trusted me to represent our village as best I could and to be truthful in my intentions. Perhaps the best way to start that goal is to be honest right from the start. She shrugged her shoulders slightly and watched the elderly Cage nod before continuing. I was curious to see if something akin to peace could actually be achieved in this way after giving the issue some more thought. Possibly it would be a positive beginning, if not true peace. Even though I'm still a little hesitant to proceed, I want to check to see if that old Hokage is correct. I've decided to send you, Kuretsuchi, for that reason. You have a level head on your shoulders and are my granddaughter. Compared to someone named Genin, I have more faith in you. You'll do a great job representing our village, and you'll show the Hokage and I that we can somehow put aside our differences and make peace. Kuretsuchi sighed and went on, saying, you get the general idea, but he said some other things too. He eventually started complaining about his back, so I told him he needed to find someone to take his place. To get the young girl to look at her, Anko gently chopped her new pupil on top of her head at this point. All right, that's enough of that. We obtain the image. Do you know what you need to do now, Kuretsuchi? There's still a lot of bad blood between our villages, and I carry a lot of the same grudges that my grandpa holds, Kuretsuchi said, sighing once more and reluctantly nodding her head before turning to face Naruto and swiftly shaking her new teammate's hand. Therefore, just to give you a fair warning, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, don't expect us to get along immediately. I swear to you as an Iwaku no Ichi and on behalf of my grandfather, the Tsuchikage, that I will not attempt to harm or attack you. Working as a team can be challenging at first, but let's hope that, in time for the Chunin exams, we can put aside our differences and form a bond as at least productive teammates. I promise that I will be a huge asset to you and your team with my abilities. Kuretsuchi bowed her head to the red-headed Namikaze child and waited for a response. There's no need to bow your head to me when I haven't earned your respect, Kuretsuchi-san, Naruto said, placing one of her hands on Kuretsuchi's shoulders and forcing her to look into her eyes once more while she rubbed the back of her head, unsure of how to feel about having an Iwaku no Ichi bow her head to her. I appreciate your honesty, and it's nice to know you won't try to kill me, but, the redhead looked at her team and then at the Hokage, then back at her new teammate. It's going to be hard to build trust between us after what I've been through recently, she said. Okay, Kuretsuchi-san. Let's just go one step at a time. Now that the Iwaku no Ichi was genuinely interested, Kuretsuchi arched an eyebrow and gave Naruto another direct look. What have you been through lately? Could you give a detailed account of what transpired? The Hokage said, it's good to see that you two are being civil with each other, but save that discussion for later, before Naruto could even finish her sentence. I would like you to lead your team to your training area and begin with some team building activities, Anko-chan. Before I send you on any missions, you and your team need to get to know each other. Since both of you nod, he waited for Anko to talk to her team. As for you two, Naruko-chan, Kuretsuchi-chan, I want you to stay behind for a moment so I can discuss something with the both of you. Naruko, Kuretsuchi, the two of us will be waiting for you at training ground number 44, Anko said, grinning slyly at her team. I'm sure you already know where that is, Naruko-chan. You two, don't keep us waiting too long. Isn't it a bit nasty to start with? After all, this new sensei of theirs was freaking creepy. Naruko and Kuretsuchi gave her a series of quick nods before turning to the Hokage, and they did so with a rather nasty-looking smirk that sent shivers down their spines. The girls literally begged him not to hold them for too long. Don't let your new sensei intimidate you too much. The old Hokage couldn't help but smirk as he watched Anko leave with Rihashi right behind her, without even looking at his teammates. He scratched at his beard and began to perspire as he questioned whether Anko was really the best person to lead this team, or any genin team, for that matter. To avoid keeping them too long, he brushed that idea aside and decided it would be best to get straight to the point. Aside from your sensei, I wanted to talk to you two about a few things. First, Naruko-chan, please introduce Kuretsuchi-chan to your family. The Sandaime Hokage smirked as he saw their wide eyes. What better way to help you overcome your differences than by having Kuretsuchi-chan live together with you in your home? The Hokage went on after seeing Naruko nod in response. Kuretsuchi-chan, Naruko-chan, you'll be living together from now on. Apart from that, Naruto-kun seems to have a way with people, so I'm interested to see what will happen when she meets him. The old Hokage nodded his head at the two, laughing quietly at his own thoughts. Now go on. You wouldn't want to hold your new sensei up, would you? These are my directives, but you can talk about this among yourselves later. Good luck, you two. Hiruzen smirked at the Yandaime photo on the wall and laughed as he heard them complain briefly as they left his office. Oh, this will be entertaining to watch, he said. The Uzumaki Namikaze estate later that day. The blonde rolled over and moaned, leave me alone. Zabuza-sensei, as Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze lay on the ground in his backyard, huffing and puffing, his arm covering his eyes to protect them from the fading light. I'm worn out. You haven't given me a break yet, even though we have been training together all day. Gaki, get up. I will do everything in my power to train you if I decide to live here. Shut up and stop whining. Haku had to go through more. Now stand up and attack me once more. A chill went down Zabuza's spine as he helped Naruto stand up and re-entered his stance. He looked back to see Kushina standing at the back door, lightly striking her free hand with the frying pan of doom. Dinner is coming up. You knew what would happen to you if you tried to bully my son out there, Zabuza. My son is not an exception to the rule that everyone needs occasional breaks. Come in and eat now. Or would you prefer that I demonstrate to you what happens to my household's disobedient members? Kushina grinned at the former Kiri swordsman, enjoying the fact that she could make him so fearful. After giving Naruto another nod, Zabuza strapped the sword to his back and said, well, let's head inside. You know, eat dinner and perhaps get some sleep. How does it sound to continue your training tomorrow? Actually, I might have a mission tomorrow, Naruto said after initially nodding his head. I have to meet with my team, and we may be going on a mission or training. In any case, that's what it usually is. I can get back to you then if you don't mind waiting until around noon. The blonde smiled up at the older man after he shrugged his shoulders and nodded his head in agreement. Good. Let's go have dinner now. The best food is made by Ka-san. Gaki's got a point, her cooking is pretty damn good. Zabuza nodded his head and sighed softly in response to that last statement. After the Namikaze runt had gone inside, he heard the front door open and turned to face Naruko. He gave her a gentle wave before turning to face her companion. Who's that? Naruto then left the dining room to meet his sister, but he hesitated for a second before he asked the question he had been thinking about. Is this your new teammate? I apologize for the question, but are you a girl or a guy? I ask because, although it's difficult to tell with some people, you look far too attractive to be a guy. Similar to the recent mission I went on with my Ne-chan. When we first met someone named Haku, we thought he was a girl because of his attractive face. It was quite shocking to learn that Haku was a guy. I just need to be certain, so please don't take offense at my inquiry. With a puzzled look on her face, Kuretsuchi turned to face Naruko's brother and said, so this is your brother, huh Naruko-san? He looks interesting. Kuretsuchi approached Naruto and gave him a gentle head bump, making him blink a few times in bewilderment. His name is Kuretsuchi. No, I didn't take offense, and yes, I am a girl. I was informed about the mission and the events by Naruko-san, so I completely understand your confusion. Kuretsuchi sighed and merely shook her head, gazing at the floor. After all, you're not the first to be confused about my gender, sadly. I sometimes wonder if I should dress and act a bit more feminine. Then perhaps I wouldn't be mistaken for a boy. Don't say that, Naruto said with a smile and a prod to her forehead. Just the way you are, you're adorable. Thus, Kuretsuchi-chan, don't worry. He turned to his sister as they rounded the corner, narrowing his eyes at her, and said, Sorry Kuretsuchi-chan, seems somebody needs to talk to me for a sec. Naruto gave her his best smile before feeling himself yanked aside. He laughed to himself before shouting in pain as he felt himself hit in the head. I was merely attempting to show your new friend some courtesy. He screamed again as Naruto sneered at him and struck him once more. No, you were flirting with her, you jerk. I assumed you were only interested in Sakura-chan, Ino-chan, and me. You're pursuing my new teammate now. She's not even fond of us. Naruto leaned in close and started whispering to her brother, lowering her voice now for fear that Kuretsuchi might overhear her. Kuretsuchi-san is the granddaughter of the current Tsuchikage. Iwa is where she's from, and as you know, they dislike Toussaint. So, Naruto-kun, please, exercise caution. After a few minutes, Naruto stepped back and smirked at her brother before flicking him in the nose, saying, There, now you won't even think about flirting again. Naruto leaned in close, placed her lips gently upon her brother's, and gave him a passionate kiss, seemingly in an effort to take possession of him. Whether you like it or not, you will be loyal to me as one of your girlfriends. Come on, Naru-kun. Let's go have dinner. Naruto pronounced the suffix kun as sensuously as she could, or at least that's how she saw it. She took Naruto's hand, wrapped it around her waist, and turned to walk back around the corner, only to discover that Kuretsuchi had been listening the entire time. Naruto's eyes widened, turning a vivid pink, and she turned her head away. So, were you discussing me with your brother? Earlier, I assured you that I would not harm you or your family. To be honest, I'm even making every effort to get along. In addition, your brother has been quite kind thus far and gave me a compliment. Thank you for that. Now, with a cunning grin, Kuretsuchi took Naruto's other hand, put it around his neck on her shoulder, then leaned in to kiss his whiskered cheek. How about we go have dinner and get to know one another better? The Iwa Kunoichi waited to see how Naruto would respond, and when he saw that she was glaring at him with daggers, Kuretsuchi grinned even more. Oh, this is going to be fun, he said, laughing quietly as he led the three into the dining room and sat down at the table. Old man, sometimes I wonder what goes through that head of yours. Are you going senile already? My poor boy is not going to last if this keeps up. Zabuza, on the other hand, found the whole situation amusing and laughed throughout the majority of the meal at the expense of the poor boy. Kushina, on the other hand, found herself worried about her poor boy, and the fact that Kuretsuchi would be living with them during her stay in Konoha only made her worries worse. After finishing her meal, Kushina got up from her chair and picked up the frying pan, sighing to herself. She then walked over to Zabuza and swung the frying pan of doom, knocking him unconscious before he could finish his meal. Stop laughing at my son's misfortune, she said. And you too. Kushina turned to face the two girls, narrowed her eyes, and raised her ki, aiming it expressly at them. Stop bothering Naruto-kun, finish your dinner, and then go to bed. Do you not see how panicked my poor boy is at the moment? Kuretsuchi leaned in close to Naruto and Naruko, whispering to them both in a low voice, Does this always happen to that guy? The three younglings turned to face Zabuza, who was lying on the floor with a big bruise already forming on his face. It appears to be painful. Naruko sighed and nodded. He's been hit with the frying pan about 12 times since he moved in with us last night. Are you correct, Naru-kun? The three sighed and went back to eating after seeing her brother nod in agreement. Kuretsuchi and Naruko would occasionally glare at one another before turning away and huffing the next time. These are going to be a long couple of months. Good luck, Naruto-kun. You're going to need it, especially once little Ino-chan and Sakura-chan hear that you have a new girl living under your roof. I can only imagine how that conversation will go. Kushina sighed at that, but she assumed it was the best she could hope for at this point. Kushina shook her head, sighed again, and got up from her chair to start cleaning dishes. The following morning, currently wearing only his pajama pants and carrying his clothes for the day under his right arm, Naruto yawned loudly as he made his way to the bathroom in the upstairs hallway. Since it was still early in the morning, he assumed that no one else should be awake, at least until he arrived at the bathroom and opened the door. Kuretsuchi was naked and using a towel to dry herself off inside the bathroom. Naruto, who was still half asleep, had to rub his eyes several times to make sure he wasn't seeing things, and when it finally clicked inside his head, the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki turned a bright red before turning around and hastily closing the door behind him. I am so sorry. You moved in here last night, and I totally forgot about it. As soon as she saw Naruto in the doorway, Kuretsuchi quickly covered herself. The Iwakunoichi's face had turned the same shade of red as Naruto's, and she initially wanted to strike him with some of her Yoden lava release jutsu for staring at her in that manner, but she changed her mind after realizing that the Uzumaki Namikaze boy was still half asleep and truly apologized for what he had done. As she finished drying herself, the black-haired girl let out a sigh, shook her head, and started talking to the boy who she assumed was still waiting at the door. It's okay. Naruto-san, just be careful not to do it again. He's not even that cute, so how is a boy seeing me nude okay? Why am I even forgiving him? Kuretsuchi blinked at that, complained to herself, and started putting on the outfit she had chosen for the day. With a smile on his face, Naruto said, "Thank you for forgiving me, Kuretsuchi-chan," nodding his head as he spoke to her through the door. "I apologize. I really do mean it. I was simply worn out from everything that had happened yesterday. Sincerely, I had no idea that we had new house guests staying with us. Nevertheless, I must make this admission. You're really adorable." Kuretsuchi's mind was racing, trying to figure out what to make of the situation at hand, and after a while she stammered out a few words, unsure of what she should really say in response. Thank you," she said, blushing as she froze in what she was doing, clipping her training bra on when he said that, and it now lay on the floor, having fallen out of her hands when the girl froze. "Thank you so much for your kind words. I'll be out in a moment, I guess. I apologize for the delay." The young Kunoichi realized what she was thinking and slapped herself again before she continued getting dressed. "That's it, I'm going to train extra hard today and rid myself of these horrible thoughts. Damn it, he's Namikaze's son." Kuretsuchi slapped a hand to her face and shook her head. Get a hold of yourself, Kuretsuchi. If you don't get your act together, there's going to be some very awkward moments living here with them. Afterwards, Ichiraku Ramen, the amazing Ayame Ichiraku, and her father brought Naruto some delicious ramen, which he sat down to eat with two of his girlfriends, Sakura and Ino. He sighed softly and started massaging his shoulders as the father-daughter team made his next bowl. "Man, Zabuza-sensei is absolutely brutal," Naruto said. "The worst part isn't even that I'm sore all over. This morning, I happened to walk in on Kuretsuchi-chan in the restroom, nude. What? I'm shocked she didn't." He blinked and glanced to his left and right, sensing some serious ki from his two girlfriends. "What did I say? Or did I make a mistake? What's the matter?" Sakura was the first to say, "Kuretsuchi-chan." The next thing poor Naruto knew, two fists, one from each girl, were clobbered over his head. "Why haven't we heard anything about this girl?" "Yes. She is Naruto-kun. But who? She was using your shower. But why?" Evidently agitated by this, Kuretsuchi-chan, that Naruto had brought up, Ino yelled. When Naruto received his second bowl of ramen, he rubbed his sore head and thanked Ayame. Looking at his two girlfriends, the blonde sighed deeply and said, "I apologize. I didn't realize I hadn't told you two yet." Indeed, Gigi stated that Kuretsuchi-chan and Zabuza-sensei would be staying with us while they were in Konoha. A kunoichi from Iwagakure named Kuretsuchi is here for a shinobi exchange program or something similar to promote harmony between the nations and secret villages. Gigi decided it would be wise to have her live with us because she is the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage, who still harbor resentment toward my two-san. "So why did you decide it was okay to peep on her in the shower, Naruto-kun?" Ino was the first of his girlfriends to ask him a question as he shrugged his shoulders and started to work on his second bowl of ramen. "As your girlfriends, did you think that would be acceptable?" With another sigh, Naruto quickly finished his second bowl of ramen, then handed it to Ayame and asked for a third. He turned to face Ino, rested an elbow on the counter, and gave her a charming smile, saying, "Ino-chan, I didn't peep. In order to take a shower and put on my clothes first, I usually try to be the first person home. In this manner, I can avoid waiting for Naruko and Ka-san to finish." The door to the bathroom was open while I was still half asleep. Naruto sighed deeply once more and thanked Ayame for the third bowl before continuing, saying, "I was actually so exhausted yesterday after training with Zabuza-sensei that I completely forgot we even had house guests. As soon as I realized what was going on, I turned around, shut the door, and apologized for stepping in on her while she was drying herself off. It was a complete accident that I saw her nude. I promise you. As her boyfriend finished his third bowl of ramen, Sakura was the next to speak up. So, did you like what you saw? Were we not as attractive as she? Since she was also genuinely interested in the question, Ino nodded in agreement. If their boyfriend answered incorrectly, they would have to take action. After finishing his third bowl, Naruto decided to speak once more. He handed it to Ayame and asked for fourths before turning to Sakura and giving her a gentle pat on the hand. You should already know that I love you both and Naruto-chan very much, he said. The three of you are the most beautiful people in my opinion. Admittedly, I find Kuretsuchi-chan cute, but does that make me interested in her? No, he smiled sweetly and gave Sakura a cheek kiss before starting to eat his fourth bowl of ramen. One have you three. Sakura and Ino both nodded at this point, recalling a discussion they had had yesterday regarding Naruto and his sister. Ino chose to express what they were both thinking. You know Naruto-kun, after something that Zabuza-sensei of yours said yesterday, I was trying to figure out what he meant by something he said to you and me, Ino said. And now that you're talking about how much you love Naruto-chan and the things you're saying about her, it really makes me wonder. Ino grabbed his whiskers and made him turn to face her, then gave him a sly smirk and a nose flick. Since when did you get together with your sister of all people? Naruto's eyes widened, and it became evident that his mind was racing at this point. Oh shit, I forgot. I had to go out on that mission and I never found the chance to tell them before I left. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. The whiskered blonde smiled nervously and started rubbing the back of his head, which was a clear sign that he was both nervous and knew for a fact that he was in serious trouble with his girlfriends. Around 2 weeks prior to that, Naruto-chan had been acting a little strange. After some conversation, she admitted that she was, in love with me. It was fairly clear when she planted a kiss on me. Sakura and Ino's eyes widened at that, appearing as though they were going to choke their boyfriend. She what? She's your sister, Naruto-kun, though. And what about us? Sakura yelled so loudly that everyone in the vicinity could hear. With a heavy sigh, Naruto patted their hands and said, let me explain, please. You are aware that I, Ka-san, and Naruto-chan are the last members of our clan, aren't you? After noticing that both of them nodded, he grinned and went on. Ka-san informed me that the council might eventually include me in something known as the Clan Restoration Act, or CRA, he explained. Above all else, however, clans such as ours have known that there is occasionally, incest. It appears to be a common practice among the Hyuga clan and others, and it helps keep things pure. Ka-san did a better job of explaining this than I did, hee. The point is that it's not really frowned upon for Naruto-chan and I to be together, and even have children together in the future if we choose to, the blonde shinobi said, ruffling his hair and groaning as he slammed his head against the counter. More significantly, though, I will have to take several wives if the council does eventually compel me to join the CRA, as Ka-san seems to believe they will. I was in a panic, but I really meant to tell you two before my mission. I wanted all three of you to be happy, but I wasn't sure how to break the news to you both. I don't want to lose any of you because I genuinely love you all three. As Naruto felt two distinct hands gently stroking his hair, he looked up to see Sakura and Ino grinning sweetly at him. Sakura started to play with his whiskers, while Ino gave him a small nose flick. Silly Naru-kun, Naruto said. We love you. Ino leaned in and kissed his lips sweetly, tasting the broth of the ramen upon his lips as she did. Leaning back, she licked her lips while Sakura took her turn. Yummy. Smirking at her boyfriend, Ino watched him blush deeply before brushing her fingers along his cheek. Sweetheart, we aren't mad at you. We only wish you had informed us earlier. Even before you did, we were aware of Naruto-chan's feelings for you. You simply didn't realize it in time. Stupid Naru-kun. I truly love you too, Naruto said, smiling at his two girlfriends and wiping away the tears that were forming at the corners of his eyes with his sleeve before putting an arm around each of them and drawing them close. I think you're really lovely. I sincerely hope that we will be together forever. Nothing will stand in our way. He gave them cheek kisses and then let them go, grinning broadly. During the remainder of their time at the restaurant, the three engaged in small talk about a wide range of topics, including the types of training they were all undergoing, the upcoming Chunin exams, missions they had all been on, their teammates, and more. When they were finally done eating, Naruto paid and escorted them both to their homes, where they were both kissed goodnight to their delight. The blonde knucklehead then went home to rest, since his sensei had told him that he was scheduled to embark on another C-rank mission the following day. After 2 months, Naruto was strolling through the village of Konoha with his 3 girlfriends and his teammates, Choji and Shino. Naruto's team had been told days ago that they had been signed up for the Chunin exams, and the same was true for Naruto's and Ino's teams. Earlier today, Kakashi Hatake had just told Sakura's team that they had been signed up for the Chunin exams, and despite their nervousness, they were calmed by Naruto's words and his presence, and they were now leaning into him while Naruto walked just off to the side of Ino. Having grown accustomed to this type of situation by now, Choji and Shino just walked behind the group without much concern because it was just a day to spend together and they were all comfortable with it. Their tranquility was tragically interrupted by a scream coming from a nearby alley, followed by what was clearly a threat to the victim's life, if not his health. Naruto broke free from his girlfriend's hold and swiftly pulled out the first sword he had been given, his Nodashi, before racing into the alley with his team and girlfriends right behind him. The scene that met them was unsettling. Two Suna shinobi, a man with paint on his face, dressed in a full black outfit of some kind, and if Naruto had to describe him in more detail, he would say that he looked like a clown with cat ears and a bad haircut. He shook his head at the thought, then turned to look at the kunoichi behind him, who was attractive, but also had some sort of weapon strapped to her back. Turning back to the male, he saw that the victim in his hands was Konohamaru, the Sandaime Hokage's grandson. The blonde Jinchuriki grabbed Konohamaru by the collar and threw him to the others, twirling his sword for a moment before he took a stance and readied himself for battle against the Suna ninja. You two do realize that this is the Sandaime's grandson, do you not? Naruto twisted his foot slightly and vanished, kicking up a bit of dust as he did so. Be mindful of your behavior in our village, Suna shinobi, or you risk being cut down right there. It's okay if you're here for the Chunin exams, but if you do anything else like this, you'll come to regret it. He turned and glared into Naruto's eyes, but then he felt a chilling presence, and a redhead appeared by his side, and he felt a cold sweat run down his back. Kankuro, stop this foolish behavior, the Suna shinobi growled as he rubbed his cheek. We're not here to make fun of children. Both of you have let me down. Would you like me to murder you? The redhead's words obviously frightened his teammates to the point of panic. After nodding, the now named Kankuro and his female teammate turned to look at their brother. We're sorry, Gaara, they said. All I'm feeling is a little agitated. In an apparent attempt to calm his brother's ire, Kankuro held his hands up and waved them placatingly in the air, saying, I'm really sorry, forgive me. I didn't mean anything by it. Kankuro, are you trying to start a damn war? The group's female member said with a sigh and a dagger-like glare at her brother. You shit off Gaara after attacking the grandson of the Sandaime Hokage. You fool, what the devil were you thinking? Gaara, you know how Kankuro gets around children, she said, turning to face him and smiling in an attempt to soothe him. Would you please pardon us this once and move on? With a sigh, Gaara looked at the blonde Jinchuriki and said, as for you, tell me your name. After a brief tilt of his head, Naruto shrugged and slipped his Nodashi away. Ka-san says it's generally considered polite to give your own name before asking someone else for theirs. But this time, I'll make an exception. Naruto nodded and threw his hands behind his head, grinning at the red-headed boy. His name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Nice to meet you, Mr. Dark and Creepy. The blonde laughed to himself and watched the boy, Gaara, intently to see how he would respond. Gaara turned away from the blonde Jinchuriki and shook his head. Gaara, it looks like your mother is hankering after your blood, Uzumaki. As he started to leave, Gaara turned to face his siblings and said, Kankuro, Temari, we're leaving. I hope to see you in the Chunin exams. Come on. He then vanished around the corner and out the end of the alley. Before following her brothers around the corner, the now named Temari glanced back at Naruto and grinned, saying, well, he's certainly an interesting one. The son of the Sandaime Hokage, and he's caught Gaara's interest. I'll have to keep an eye on this one. She disappeared after her brothers, laughing quietly to herself, leaving the other group in the alley alone. After complaining, Naruto's 3 girlfriends turned to face their boyfriend and asked, why in the world was she staring at Naru-kun like that? She should not be considering trying anything. We own him, Ino yelled, taking hold of his left arm with both hands and drawing him toward her, while Sakura took hold of his other arm and drew him in close as Naruto stepped in front of him and gave him a brief, gentle kiss on the lips before moving aside and standing beside Ino. Shaking his head, Naruto started to guide the group out of the alley and back towards their original destination before they became sidetracked. I don't know why she was looking at me like that either, girls, he said, sighing and wishing he could rub his head right then. Perhaps she recognized me as someone she knew? Naruto shook his head and sighed deeply as he saw the looks his girlfriends were giving him. Yeah, I didn't think that one would work, he said. I have no idea why she gave me that look. Let's put it out of our minds for the moment and spend the remainder of the day together, shall we? After all, who knows what might occur when the Chunin exams begin tomorrow? Before they vanished into their preferred restaurant for the day, he grinned and gave his friends and girlfriends a nod. The following day, outside the academy after a moment, Choji looked at their sensei and smiled confidently at him, saying, "We won't let you down, Asuma-sensei." Team 10 stood at the gates, looking ahead at the academy. All three of them were wearing their regular clothes, not feeling the need to change for the exams for whatever reason. At the conclusion of these tests, we will undoubtedly emerge victorious. Asuma nodded to his team and then to the academy, chuckling softly before lighting up another cigarette and saying, "Go on in there and show them what you're capable of, Naruto, Choji, Shino. I have faith in each of you three." After saying, "I know you won't let me down," he watched as the three approached the academy building and went inside without saying anything more to him. "I'm looking forward to some entertaining Chunin exams." After entering and climbing to the second floor, the three members of Team 10 noticed a sizable contingent of genin gathered around a door marked 301. Naruto frowned and turned to Shino for confirmation, saying, "Genjutsu, no doubt about it, Naruto. Let's move on to the following floor." "Should we tell them that it's just a simple genjutsu or not, Naruto?" Choji asked, scowling briefly as he turned to face his teammates. As they passed the group and went up the stairs, Naruto shook his head and turned to face his friend. "No, the explanation is also quite straightforward. We will have less competition if we leave them and they are unable to figure it out before the exams begin. For those of us who figure it out, it's cunning and dishonest, but you have to learn to expect such tactics in this world. In the end, we are ninja." After Choji nodded his head in comprehension, Naruto nodded back and got ready to move on once they arrived at the third floor, but what they heard next momentarily diverted their attention. Shino was the first to say, "It sounds like there is a fight going on somewhere else. Should we look into Naruto or keep going?" "As tempting as it is to check it out, I don't think we should," Naruto said, scowling and tapping a finger against his chin. "On the other hand, it might be a good chance to observe some of the competition. What do you two think?" "I would prefer to enter the first exam room and prepare for whatever is ahead of us," Choji said with a scowl and a shoulder shrug. "Even though it's a good opportunity to see what some of the others can do, we run the risk of being late if we go to have a look, correct?" Shino confirmed Choji's statement with a nod, saying, "That's right. Instead of investigating, it would be wise for us to continue on to our destination. But the final decision is up to you, Naruto." Shino gave his friend and teammate a slight smile before silently waiting for Naruto to make his choice. "Let's just get to the exam room," Naruto said, grinning at his teammates before continuing on to the room they were supposed to be in. People who would rather fight it out and waste their energy and chakra than go to the exam room aren't important, are they? Just makes it easier for us to kick their ass later. Naruto laughed as he pushed open room 301's door and entered with his teammates. The others who had already arrived hit them with a wave of ki right away. Naruto shrugged it off and checked on his teammates to make sure they were okay. Choji just took out a bag of chips and started eating them, while Shino seemed unaffected as well. Naruto turned to face the other competitors and let loose some of his own ki, which caused several of them to tremble where they were seated. After he finished having fun, the blonde Jinchuriki left them alone and leaned against a nearby wall. That'll teach him. Soon, more teams arrived, first Naruto's team, then Ino's and Sakura's. Naruto shook his head and chuckled to himself when he saw Sasuke. As is customary, the Teme picked a fight and got his ass kicked. "Well done, Teme Baka." Sakura and Ino rushed over to greet and cling to their beloved boyfriend, quickly pushing Sasuke aside as he glared at him and prepared to storm over and give Naruto a piece of his mind. Gah. It's unbelievable that Sasuke attempted to delay Shikamaru and me for this. He simply needed to get into a quarrel with that Lee guy. He was really creepy, I must say. He tried to make out with me despite my telling him that I already had a great boyfriend. "Well, it looks like I'll have to teach this guy a lesson," Naruto said, raising his left eyebrow as he looked around the room. "What does Sakura-chan think he looks like?" Sakura leaned in and rested her head on Naruto's shoulder after shivering. "Spooky. He has the most eerie eyebrows and is dressed in a green spandex suit. It won't take much to identify him, I promise. In addition, it's difficult to avoid recognizing that guy given his level of energy. However, Naruto-kun, exercise caution. That guy has a lot of strength and speed. I don't think he can compete with you, my love," but I still want you to exercise caution. All right? Sakura moved her head away from his shoulder, leaned up, and gave her boyfriend a tender peck on the lips before he nodded back. All right. I will make sure to keep an eye out for him. He is unquestionably strong if you say so. Hell, he must be pretty tough if he did that to Sasuke. Naruto grinned softly and started stroking his platinum blonde girlfriend's hair, asking, "How are you feeling, Ino-chan? Do you feel anxious?" Before turning to respond to her boyfriend's question, Ino glanced at Naruto as she approached them. "I'm fine," she said. "At first, I was a little anxious, but it has really helped me to be able to hold you like this. Right now, I feel like I could handle anything." She turned to Naruto after leaning up to give Naruto a kiss, saying, "Thank you for keeping me, sweetie. How are you holding up, Naruto-chan? Is your team doing okay?" "Kuretsuchi-san and I still can't be classified as friends, but we aren't bickering as much anymore," Naruto said, chuckling a little before grinning at her friends and boyfriend, brother. "We're prepared to demonstrate our teamwork to everyone present. However, Rihashi has been behaving strangely lately. About him, I'm a little concerned. I'm not overly concerned, though. Nothing can stop us from achieving our goals." Before Ino and Sakura could even respond, they heard a disturbance in the area and turned to see that a silver-haired Konoha shinobi had just been attacked by an unidentified ninja from an unidentified village. Naruto had never heard of this before, but he found it interesting that even though he had escaped the attack, the silver-haired shinobi fell to his knees and spilled his breakfast all over the floor. If I had to guess, there was something unique about that Auto Shinobi's gauntlet. I suppose I'll find out later if I end up fighting him. Everyone looked toward the front of the room to see a group of Konoha Chunin and a big, rather intimidating person standing in the middle of the large group, but before anyone could say anything more or even assist the Konoha Shinobi, there was a big puff of smoke coming from that direction. "You don't get to start any fights, maggots. Save that nonsense for later and let it go. Now, I'll be your proctor for the first exam," the large man said, grinning as he surveyed the room after receiving his response. "Let me say this once before we start. Boys and girls, welcome to hell." In a short time after the proctor's appearance, each person was given a number. The proctor started going over the guidelines for the first exam after everyone had taken their seats. Naruto and many others quickly grasped the goal based on the guidelines of this initial exam. The young Uzumaki Namikaze briefly glanced to his left and noticed Rihashi, the lone male member of his sister's team. Recalling his sister's inquisitive remarks prior to the exam, the blonde found himself frowning inwardly, careful to conceal his feelings with a neutral gaze to avoid raising suspicions in the darkness user's mind. Rihashi has not received much attention from Naruto-chan. During that mission, I didn't even really talk to him. The only time I actually heard him speak was when he defended us before the council. I have to believe her if she claims that he is acting strangely. However, what might he be concealing? The blonde nodded his head in agreement when Rihashi gave Naruto a courteous smile, then turned to face the individual to his right. One Hinata Hyuga was seated here. He could only suppose that Ino's influence on the girl was the reason she seemed to be feeling a little more confident than he had noticed her in the academy. After all, his gorgeous blonde girlfriend was a self-assured, gregarious individual, and he was certain that she would have done everything in her power to help Hinata overcome her fears. The blonde Uzumaki Namikaze smiled confidently at Hinata as she caught sight of his eyes and wished her luck on this exam and the others that lay ahead. The two of them turned to face the front of the room and waited for their intimidating proctor to announce that they could begin after observing her smile and nod in agreement. When they were told to start, Naruto turned his test paper over and started carefully going over the questions. He thought he could answer the first and second questions fairly easily, but he thought the others were a bit beyond his current skill level. The blonde completed the answers after deciding to begin with the questions he could respond to immediately. After completing those, the blonde started to slowly look around the room in an attempt to avoid being noticed by the proctor and the Chunin lining the room. "All right, so how can I find the other answers? I could call upon Haku's spirit to provide me with the answers, but I would prefer not to do so. I might need him for something significant later, so it wouldn't be worth wasting a use." Naruto ruffled his hair a little and inhaled deeply to relax, letting out a silent sigh. The Uzumaki Namikaze male looked back down at his paper, feeling utterly bewildered by what he saw as he considered what he had at his disposal that would enable him to get the answers he required. As far as Naruto could tell, all of the answers were filled in on his paper, and they were all precisely correct. At this moment, Naruto sensed that someone was watching him. Naruto looked to his left once more and was shivered by what he saw. The whole time, Rihashi was grinning and watching him. However, this smile did not reassure Naruto. Instead, it seemed somewhat sinister to him, and he started to question Rihashi's motivation. After all, there shouldn't have been anything in this test for the Dark Enigma, so why would he assist Naruto in passing it? Rihashi started to feel colder the longer the blonde stared into his eyes. Naruto chose to simply nod his head in gratitude, then turned back to his paper and inhaled a trembling breath before slowly exhaling it. It seems to me that Naruto-chan is unaware of the type of darkness that Rihashi harbors within himself. I only sensed evil in his eyes and smile. What on earth is this guy? The blonde put his head down on the desk, closed his eyes, and calmed his breathing. His life seemed to have been cut short by at least 15 years. Naruto quickly fell asleep after deciding to use this time to relax and hopefully recover from the strange experience. The final 10 minutes of the exam, Naruto's head jumped off the desk as he felt someone poke him in the side, and he looked around in astonishment and bewilderment. Wa? Was that? As Hinata watched Naruto acquaint himself with his surroundings, she couldn't stop laughing. Naruto-kun, it's time for the 10th question to be explained. Pay attention. The blonde rubbed his eyes and nodded slowly before giving Hinata a close inspection. With a nervous laugh, the blonde gave her what he hoped was a confident smile before looking to the front of the room. Hey, thanks Hinata-san. I appreciate you waking me up in time. Guess I just haven't been feeling too well today, huh? He asked. As Ibiki Morino observed the Uzumaki Namikaze boy, he grinned to himself. Well, now that we're all awake, I'll explain the rules for this 10th question. Before he could say anything more, a girl with mint green hair nearer the middle of the room sighed and raised her voice in an agitated manner. More rules? Come on, weren't there enough rules already? Now you're choosing to throw in extra rules for the 10th question? What the heck's your problem with this anyways? That made Naruto laugh, but he remained silent and allowed Ibiki to speak. Observing the expression on the girl's face, the proctor went on, if you don't want to fail for your insolence, you'd do well to be quiet, Minty. Good to see you understand. Now shut up, sit down, and listen. The blonde boy 2 rows ahead of her smirked as he turned back to face Ibiki, and the girl couldn't help but notice it as she sat down. That tiny prick, Blondie, feel free to think you're superior to me. If we ever cross paths again, I'll kick your ass. Unfortunately, it was clear that the girl had misinterpreted Naruto's smirk entirely. She has a positive outlook. She seems like a potentially fascinating individual. Yes, Naruto was considering becoming friends with the girl because he thought she was quite intriguing. How a glance can lead to miscommunications. Just before he heard the question he had been anticipating since he had spoken those words, Ibiki clarified, the most important thing you maggots need to realize is that you have a choice to make. You can either choose to remain and take this 10th question, or you can get up and walk out that door. At this point, Naruto, who still preferred to call him Clown Boy, leapt from his chair and pointed an accusing finger at Ibiki. Are you trying to call us stupid or something? If we've made it this far, what the hell makes you think we just quit now? The proctor smirked at this point and told Kankuro to take a seat. Ibiki smirked wickedly as he watched Kankuro swallow and sit back down without saying another word. Because if you attempt to answer this last question and fail, you'll never become a Chunin. That's right, fail this last question and you'll be forever stuck as a genin. And as before, should even one of you fail, the other members of your team should fail right along with you. So go ahead. Attempt this last question, fail, and piss off your teammates. It'll be fun to watch. Ibiki went silent after saying a few more things he thought the Chunin hopefuls should hear, and he kept staring around the room at each of them with a smirk on his lips. People quickly started putting up their hands and declaring their resignation. As team after team was compelled to exit the room, either because one member had quit or because all 3 of them raised their hands in unison, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze couldn't help but sigh. The blonde wasn't too worried because most of the people he knew were doing well. As the proctor waited for Ibiki to reveal the 10th question, the blonde's gaze returned to him after it appeared that every team that was about to quit had left the room. Waiting a few more seconds to see if anyone else was going to quit, Ibiki Morino took one last glance around the room. There were still several teams, and he was aware that the next proctor would be upset with him about it, but he had no control over it now. Ibiki smiled slightly, raised one arm, and spoke loud enough for all the genins in the room to hear. Congratulations. You all pass. A loud chorus of, what? Followed, of course, from many of the genin, but as soon as Ibiki said that, some of the more intelligent genin, including Naruto, realized exactly what the 10th question meant. As Ibiki continued to explain the situation to most of the genin, Naruto searched for Sakura, Ino, Naruko, and his teammates, Shino and Choji. To make sure no one had noticed, The blonde quickly glanced around to Rihashi, Kuretsuchi, the mint-haired girl, and a few others he was wary of, including the Suna Genin, the auto team, and a few others, after flashing each of them a brief message to wait for him. The blonde looked back to the front and let out a slow, steady breath when it seemed no one had noticed what he was doing. He wanted to sigh, but he knew that with Rihashi standing right beside him, the older boy would undoubtedly notice that something was bothering him and ruin his plan to speak privately with those few. The proctor had just completed his explanation when the Uzumaki Namikaze boy's gaze returned to the front. The blonde nodded his head to indicate that he had been listening, but he was taken aback when one of the windows burst inward and a banner appeared in front of the poor proctor. The banner read, introducing the sexy and single Anko Mitarashi, proctor of the second exam. Naruto couldn't help but perspire as he saw the purple-haired woman walk in front of them. The blonde listened to the friendly banter between the two proctors without even daring to speak, then looked around at the others once more. The blonde immediately decided to turn away from the mint-haired girl who was now glaring at him in order to keep looking around the room. What the devil is wrong with her? Geez. I am aware that I haven't harmed her in any way. A moment later, he looked at Gaara. Gaara's eyes were on Naruto, a chilly glare on his face, just like with the girl he had decided not to look at. Well, at least I can comprehend, Gaara. In a way. I'm curious to see what he can do in a fight after our encounter yesterday, so I'm sure he feels the same way. Hopefully. His scowl essentially shouts, Dai Uzumaki Namikaze. The blonde boy looked back toward the front of the room, shuddering slightly at that thought. Anko Mitarashi, the woman, had just begun speaking to the class's gender. The Uzumaki Namikaze boy got up from his seat and went to wait for his teammates and girlfriends in a corner of the room after telling the lot to meet her at training ground number 44 no later than 30 minutes. Naruto stood with Naruko, Kuretsuchi, Shino, Choji, and Ino after the room had been cleared. It took Sakura several minutes of arguing with Sasuke before the moron allowed her to talk to her boyfriend. But the presence of Kuretsuchi was somewhat different. The two Uzumaki Namikaze siblings trusted her enough to let her in on whatever Naruto wanted to discuss because she had just refused to leave. Naruto inhaled deeply and exhaled slowly. He then glanced at everyone in his immediate vicinity before focusing on Naruko. Naruko-chan. The younger sibling closed his eyes and nodded his head in agreement after noticing her nod. When they all nodded, Naruto let out a deep sigh and shook his head. I'm sure you noticed that Rihashi was sitting on my left during the exam. Yeah, I think I see what you mean now, Naruko-chan. At this, Choji became alert and took a moment to stop eating his favorite chips. What do you mean by that, Naruto? Did something happen? At that, Naruto laughed and slowly nodded his head. Yes, and no. Naruto glanced around once more and grinned slightly. To put it simply, Rihashi gives me a really bad feeling. I don't know why, but as I was trying to think of some way to get the answers to the 3rd through 9th questions, Rihashi answered all of my remaining questions for me. And before you say anything about that, any of you, think about it for a moment. Sure, Rihashi might know that Naruko and I want to become Chunin together, that it's been a dream of ours for a long time now, but he has no real reason to help me. At this point, the blonde began to tremble a bit, so his girlfriends each gave him a firm hug in an effort to soothe him. The Uzumaki Namikaze boy looked at each of his friends one at a time, shivering slightly before laughing nervously to himself. When I looked into Rihashi's eyes to try and figure out why he did such a thing, I swear I felt like my life was coming to an end. I don't like saying this about your teammate Naruko-chan, but there's just something evil about him. That's actually why I wanted you guys to stay behind. Be careful. No matter what, be careful of Rihashi. I don't trust him. At this point, Naruto embraced Sakura tightly and ran his fingers through her hair while gazing into her eyes. He leaned back and gave her a passionate kiss before turning to face Ino. Don't you dare let Sasuke pull you and Shikamaru into a fight against this guy. I don't want to see you get hurt, Sakura-chan. Naruto held his platinum blonde sweetheart close and kissed her in the same manner he had Sakura just moments before. Ino, I know how hot-headed Kiba can be, but I'm sure you can think of something to keep Dog Boy on a tight leash. Keep him away from Rihashi and keep yourself out of harm's way. When they parted ways, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze at last looked at Naruko and Kuretsuchi. I know you two are on a team with Rihashi, but watch each other's backs, okay? I doubt he'll try to harm either of you, but I want you to be extra careful just in case. No matter what this next exam entails, do your best to pass it quickly and wait for me at the end. I don't know what we can expect in the next exam or whatever might come after, but please just be careful. Okay, you two. After raising an eyebrow, Kuretsuchi shrugged and embraced Namikaze's son. Smirking, the Iwakunoichi gave him a quick peck on the nose to agitate his girlfriends before stepping back and whistling innocently to herself, a puzzled look on her face the entire time. Hey, no need to worry about me, Naruto-san. I appreciate your concern though. After giving Kuretsuchi a brief glare, Naruto gave her brother a firm embrace and a kiss as intense as the ones he had given Sakura and Ino before her. You be careful too, Naru-kun. I saw Marco 2 rows in front of me. I think he's going to try and come after you at some point, so be very, very careful, promise? At that news, Naruto scowled and slowly nodded. Yeah, I promise, Naruto-chan. If I do encounter Marco, my big concern is his new teammates. What are they capable of? And what is that prick now capable of after being trained by Danzo? I really don't like this one bit. I had hoped he wouldn't have been allowed to participate. Kuretsuchi took this opportunity to put her hands on Naruto's and Naruto's shoulders while the others scowled at this news. Naruto, you don't have to worry about Naruto-san. So long as she and I are together, there isn't a damn thing that rapist bastard can do to her. Besides that, we do have Rihashi with us. As creepy as that guy is, it might help to deter Marco from attacking. Kuretsuchi turned to face Naruto, grinned, and gave her a light shoulder punch. Kuretsuchi had quickly corrected herself at the looks she had received from Naruto's 3 girlfriends, and all he could do was laugh at the situation. As for you, Naruto, you need to relax. Your brother is a tough guy, and if Marco tries to attack him, who do you think would win? You don't even need to give it a second thought, right? The answer is clearly Naruto-kun. Naruto-san. Naruto embraced the Iwakunoichi and patted her on the back before stepping back before anyone could speak to her. Smirking at her, Naruto nodded his head and started to walk away, but he stopped a few paces away. Thanks for that, Kuretsuchi-chan. I knew you were awesome, Dadbao, he said. Wait. The boy from Uzumaki Namikaze, who was blonde, turned back to the others and frowned once more. When he saw a collective nod, he said, stay away from the Tsunagenin, namely Gaara. He's the one with red hair and that large gourd on his back. Something about that guy just screams. I'll kill you all. To me. Sue. Yeah. Be careful. Okay, everyone? Each of them then went off to rejoin their teams or go to the 44th training ground. Training ground number 44. Entrance to the Forest of Death. Many were taken by surprise once everyone had reached their destination. The fact that one Sasuke Uchiha actually attempted to attack Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze caught them off guard, not the forest's immense size or its noises. Sasuke tried to punch Naruto and yelled, "You stupid bastard Namikaze! You were trying to make me late, weren't you?" Naturally, every blow the Uchiha threw at him was intercepted or blocked by the blonde, but this only made the Uchiha even more angry. Fortunately, the second exam's proctor had chosen to step in rather violently. Anko had materialized behind Sasuke and forcefully slammed him into the ground. Shut up, brat. And you? Anko turned to face Naruto, who was sent reeling backwards for a few feet after taking a hard punch to the face. That's for whatever it was you did to piss this idiot off. I won't tolerate any shit, is that understood? By all of you? Anko smiled as he walked to the front, looking around at all the genin. While Sasuke muttered a few curses and returned to Shikamaru's side, Naruto's teammates and girlfriends hurried to see how he was doing. Naruto slowly took his hand away from his face and turned to listen to the guidelines for this second exam. This proctor's a hard ass. Didn't even do anything and I still got hit. Shit. Despite the throbbing pain in his cheek, he had to tell his girlfriends to pay attention because, of course, they had decided it was more important to try and check on their boyfriend. He somehow managed to persuade them that he was fine. Naruto couldn't resist giving Sasuke a quick glare as Anko started to go over the second exam's rules. Soon enough, that little shit will pay for this. He couldn't help but notice something strange as the blonde turned back to face Anko. A single Kunoichi was observing Sasuke closely from a short distance away from his team. If he had to describe it, she had a gleeful expression on her face. Naruto immediately averted his gaze and resumed listening to the rules, feeling extremely uneasy. With all the weirdos present, these tests are already severely flawed. The Teme of all people is being inspected by a creepy girl now. Really, I'm getting creeps from that. Afterwards, inside the Death Forest each team had gathered their scroll and proceeded to their designated gate after hearing the exam's rules from the sexy Anko Midarashi, as the proctor reportedly liked to call herself. There, they were made to wait until they were informed that they could enter the Forest of Death. Almost all the way around, On the other side of the gate where they had submitted their consent forms, Team 10 had been assigned, but instead of complaining, they just waited for their opportunity to enter the forest. A few minutes after being granted entry, the 3 members of Team 10 hurried inside and found a dark hiding place. They discussed strategy for a while before deciding to just try to set up a trap for any teams in the area. Naruto and Choji nodded to Shino, the group's insect user, and observed as the young man dispatched his Kakaichu in various directions to find a team to ambush. After 30 minutes as his group sought refuge high among trees, Naruto couldn't help but sigh. So far, Shino's Kakaichu had only discovered Forest of Death native life forms. They thought it might take some time to find another team because the Forest of Death was apparently much larger than they had anticipated. Choji, obviously unhappy about having to camp out in the woods like this without extra packs of his favorite snacks, said, "So what do we do now? We need to get an earth scroll and get to the tower. I don't know about you two, but I don't want to be stuck eating worms or something until we pass this exam." Naruto shook his head after chuckling softly to himself. "I figured we would have found another team by now, Choji-san. I've never actually been in the Forest of Death before, so I don't really know how big it is. It could take us a day or two to find another team if we're really unlucky. Or..." Shino shook his head and put a finger to his lips. The Aburame pointed down at the clearing beneath them, realizing that his friends were now paying attention to him. "I think one of them can sense us. They haven't moved since landing in that spot 1 minute ago." When he saw that mop of mint green hair, the Uzumaki Namikaze boy scowled. Naruto sighed and leapt down from the tree, realizing that they had already been discovered and that it would only be a matter of time before this team discovered them. The blonde smiled at the Taki team and rubbed the back of his head as he landed in the clearing a short distance away. "Yo." As the blonde boy's teammates showed up at his side and complained, the girl watched. "Great, I knew we had found somebody, but did it have to be you?" Naruto blinked a few times and pointed a finger at his face. "Do you have some kind of a problem with me? Or are you just not looking forward to having to fight me?" At this, the girl snarled and made a move to hit Naruto, but she stopped when his teammates stepped in to protect him if necessary. The girl scoffed, turned away, and complained for a while before answering. "You're a damn jerk, you know that? You just think you're so much better than me, don't you, asshole?" Now, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was truly perplexed. He stepped forward and put a hand on the Taki Kunoichi's shoulder after telling Shino and Choji to get down. "Hey, I'm not sure why you would think that, but I wasn't thinking that. I don't even know you, so how could I possibly know which of us is better, if either of us is truly superior to the other in anything?" With a somewhat doubtful expression on her face, the girl gazed into Naruto's eyes. "I saw you smirking at me during the first exam. You thought I was being stupid." At that, Naruto shook his head and laughed. "Wow, you really misinterpreted my facial expression there. I thought you were kinda funny, but in a good way. I thought you had a good attitude and was wondering what it'd be like if we were friends. Never once did the thought of me actually being superior to you cross my mind." At that, the girl arched an eyebrow, then stepped back and met his gaze. "You're a strange one, aren't you? Before we fight, why don't you tell me your name? I'm Fu." With a smile, Naruto held out his hand to her. "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, it's a pleasure to meet Yafu-san." The blonde rushed forward and gave the girl, who was now called Fu, a hard blow to the stomach, knocking her out cold and causing her to fall to her knees in front of him. As his teammates easily defeated Fu's teammates, Naruto knelt next to her, leaned in close, and started whispering in her ear. Seeing her furious expression, the blonde laughed a little before stepping back just enough to get a better look at her face. "Sorry about that, but this is an exam after all. Aside from that, I kinda wanted to talk for a bit. I couldn't help but notice the scornful looks of your teammates. You're here against your will, aren't you, Fu-san?" Before she controlled her emotions, Fu's eyes widened just a little. She sighed in frustration and chose to speak, though, since it was clear that Naruto had noticed her emotional moment. Fu closed her eyes and shook her head, complaining, "I'm really only here so these two jerks can become Chunin. Even if I were to pass every exam and beat everyone here, I'd never be made a Chunin. Not in my village. I'm an outcast in my own village. I don't get any respect from anyone. Sometimes, some of the assholes have even attacked me, saying I'm just a fucking monster." After scowling at that, Naruto turned to face his stomach. After a few seconds, the blonde couldn't help but ask the question that came out of his mouth. "Forgive me for asking, but are you perhaps a Jinchuriki?" Fu's expression changed to one of panic as she lifted her head and met Naruto's eyes. The blonde waved a finger at her and told her to shut up before she could even ask him what he knew. Reluctantly, The girl with the mint hair stayed silent and gestured for Naruto to go on. The reason I ask Fu-san is because that sounds kind of familiar. Despite being the son of the Yondaime Hokage, there are some in the village that have attempted to beat me or have me killed. It's troublesome, for lack of a better word, but it happens. And the reason? It's because I'm a Jinchuriki, and what I carry inside of me is what's responsible for so much destruction and the death of my two san. The Kyuubi no Yoko. So, I just had to ask. Before she felt all of her strength leave her body, Fu blinked a few times. Fu remained on her knees, pressing her hands against the floor in front of her to keep herself upright. When Fu looked up into his eyes, he could see that he was being serious. Hey, you're not lying, are you Naruto-san? You're being serious here? The mint-haired girl made herself stand up and smiled broadly at the blonde boy in front of her after laughing a little harder. In that case, it's really very nice to meet you Naruto-san. But, why tell me all this? After giving her a shoulder shrug, Naruto turned to face her two unconscious teammates. The blonde laughed to himself as he waited for Fu's response. Shino and Choji began working on what they knew Naruto would propose. They were taking Fu's teammates somewhere to dump them somewhere. Because you deserve better, and I think you would do well here in our village. If you're interested, I already have a plan that I think might work. If not, well, we could just deal with the consequences later, I'm sure. For a long time, Fu could not speak. It got so bad, in fact, that Naruto started to question whether or not she had remembered to keep breathing. When she eventually composed herself and was able to reply, the tacky Jinchuriki was beaming broadly and threw her arms around Naruto, giving him a tight hug. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze laughed softly and said, "If you really mean that, I'll be forever grateful. Just do whatever it takes to help me, please." He then nodded joyfully and started to explain his plan to Fu and his teammates. The following day, Naruto's group Rihashi, Kuretsuchi, and Naruto happened upon what looked like the scene of a single, extremely fierce battle. The team saw two genin talking to each other in the odd artificial clearing in front of them. Naruto's team took a step closer and started listening to hear what they could. Damn it. I didn't think anyone was strong enough to beat Fu, let alone kill her, and to top that off, those assholes took our scroll. What the hell are we supposed to do now? One of the tacky genin replied. The other merely shook his head and gazed up at the sky, while the first sighed fiercely. He scowled at his teammate and shook his head once more. It's obvious we're not getting past this exam. We're supposed to pass it as a team after all, aren't we? So we're pretty fucked. I'm more concerned about what Sensei is going to do once he realizes Fu's gone. We fucked up big time and I am most certainly not looking forward to seeing what he'll do to us. My suggestion? We run and hope to Kami we don't run into that blonde guy and his team again. There's no telling what they'd do to us if we bumped into them again. As the conversation went on, Naruto and Kuretsuchi came to the conclusion that Naruto had to be the subject of their conversation. The team entered the clearing and started surveying the devastation as soon as the tacky genin had escaped in the direction of one of the exits. Naruto soon scowled as he turned to face Kuretsuchi. The female Uzumaki Namikaze sighed, bringing a hand to her face and shaking her head incredulously. Naruto-kun isn't the type to kill without reason. If I had to guess, I'd say something weird's going on. Then again, that's usually the case when he's involved. Meanwhile, Kuretsuchi was surveying the devastation. I don't know Naruto-san. This is some heavy destruction here. Whatever happened, there's only one real way to find out and that's to ask Naruto-kun directly. Otherwise, we're just stuck making guesses without knowing the whole damn truth. As soon as Naruto's left eyebrow raised, she turned to Kuretsuchi. There you go again. Why do you keep calling my boyfriend, Naruto-kun? Are you hot for my brother? Another team emerged into the clearing before Kuretsuchi could even think of a response to that. Naruto turned to them quickly, her eyes widened, and she stepped back a little, reaching for her swords. Marco. Naruto's former teammate looked up and down in gratitude, grinning. Marco smiled ominously as he noticed the doubtful expressions on Team Naruto's faces. You're looking as good as ever Naruto-chan. As much as I'd love to knock you out and finally take what you owe me, I'm not here for a fight. Instead, I'd like to deliver a simple warning. With that, Marco disappeared into the forest with his team, leaving Naruto and her teammates behind. After what I went through, I'm going to make sure I kill Naruto extra slow right in front of you Naruto-chan. Danzo-sama has helped me become even stronger, and I highly doubt your puny little shit stain of a brother stands a chance of beating me now. You'd better start making funeral preparations Naruto-chan. Farewell. Rihashi said nothing as usual, but his eyes were still on Marco as he ran away. In contrast, Kuretsuchi was enraged. The Iwakunoichi knelt beside Naruto, gave her a tight hug, and ran a hand up and down her back. As Marco was speaking, Naruto started to feel sick and fell to her knees. Calm yourself, Naruto-san. I've never seen you react so badly to someone before. She had begun to shake and had started to break out in a cold sweat. Kuretsuchi scowled at this and simply kept Naruto close until she felt better. Feeling better now, Naruto? Good. We should just trust that no matter what, Naruto-kun will be alright. In the meantime, we need to find another team and get a heaven scroll. I'd rather not be out here with a creep like that running around. Come on. The blonde found herself glaring at Kuretsuchi once more as he assisted Naruto in standing up. At that, Kuretsuchi couldn't help but smirk for a second before bursting into laughter. Seriously, why do you keep calling him Naruto-kun? Naruto quickly started pursuing Kuretsuchi, keeping him away from the devastation. When Rihashi saw that his teammates had returned to normal, he immediately pursued them. But as he pursued, he couldn't help but grin cruelly. Marco, you might still get your chance. But when you fight him, I'm sure you'll be disappointed. Team 10 in other parts of the forest. The team proceeded to stage her death after obtaining Fu's scroll, which was regrettably another scroll from heaven. Naruto had come up with the idea for the enormous destruction, and he and Choji had collaborated to make it look as though the two Jinchuriki had engaged in a major battle. Team 10 then took the time to lead Fu to one of the exits, where they reconnected with Anko. Anko had been requested by Naruto to arrange for someone to take Fu to meet the Sandame. Because she's going to be living with me from now on, the blonde simply smiled when asked why. Anko's response to this had been invaluable, but Naruto had remained completely composed in spite of her taunting remarks, while Fu had started to flush a very deep shade of red. Eventually, Anko had taken Fu in person to meet with the Hokage, while Team 10 had made the decision to continue looking for a team that might have the Earth Scroll they required. Currently, Naruto and his companions were observing what was clearly the scene of a fierce battle. They could see blood splatters on the ground, broken tree branches, charred wood, and other debris everywhere, but what really agitated Naruto was the sight of pink hair strands resting on one of the tree limbs. Sakura. Shino came up behind Naruto and put a gentle hand on his friend's shoulder. Naruto. Sakura is probably doing fine. She might have some injuries, but we would probably already be aware of them if she had passed away. For now, unwind. At dawn, we'll search for your girlfriend. All right. The bug user led the group to a dimly lit area after observing Naruto nod in agreement and decided to take the first watch while his friends slept. The following day, Team 7 Sakura and Shikamaru had tried their hardest to hide somewhere they wouldn't be discovered, but as luck would not allow, they went out to fight the Auto Genin that had discovered them while doing everything they could to protect the still unconscious Sasuke. Unfortunately, even though the two had become more proficient over time, their opponents had already defeated them, and things were looking bleak. Rock Lee had saved the pink-haired girl as the Auto Genin was about to strike her with the final blow, but eventually he had also lost, even though it was a cheesy trick. Sakura, on her knees, praying for some miracle to happen, had not expected Sasuke to come before her and tear Zaku's arms out of their sockets. Of course, he had also smashed up Zaku's right arm pretty badly beforehand, but was that really important? Sakura had continued to fight hard, even after Shikamaru and Rock Lee had been rendered unconscious, but she simply couldn't do it alone. When Sakura looked up at her teammate, the pink-haired Kunoichi was startled to see dark flames covering his body and an odd tattoo starting to cover his face. Sakura literally begged Sasuke to stop, and soon after he had defeated the other Auto Genin, the corrupt Uchiha turned against her. How could one call Sasuke corrupted when he was already a dark person? Even so, Sakura was now sitting defenseless as Sasuke came toward her, ready to attack his own teammate, so she was extremely grateful when a blur materialized and kicked Sasuke away from her. The pinkette, who was getting a closer look as soon as the blurred figure landed in front of her, grinned broadly before exhaling in relief. Naruto-kun. Thank you for coming, Kami. He killed them. Sasuke simply murdered them, and he. Sakura was about to respond when Naruto hurried over, wrapped his arms around her, and gave her a passionate kiss before barraged her with inquiries. Sakura-chan. Are you all right? You were harmed by whom? What took place? These were only a few of the questions posed. In the few seconds that followed, Naruto was able to ask a great deal more. Before kissing her boyfriend, Sakura gave a cute little giggle. You need to relax and calm down, silly. I'm in pain, but I'm fine. Later, I'll explain everything. You must take immediate action regarding Sasuke. When Sasuke charged, Naruto summoned Haku's ice powers and slashed forward, successfully capturing the Uchiha in a wave of ice. Naruto nodded slowly before getting back up and turning to face the Uchiha. Using his Shi no Tachi, the blonde swiftly blocked a fireball from Sasuke, easily slicing the Kaiden Jutsu in half, dispersing it before it could do more than raise the local temperature. Naruto frowned as he gazed at the Uchiha. Sure, the ice had gotten up Sasuke's body and trapped him in a block of ice, but what really worried him were the markings, which were still glowing fiercely and gave the impression that Sasuke was actually struggling to escape, which was strange to Naruto given that he was trapped in a block of ice and wasn't even supposed to be conscious. This fact caused the blonde to sigh, so she stabbed the Shi no Dachin into the ground at his feet and used a little more of Haku's power to suck the breath out of Sasuke's lungs. This worked, as the Uchiha quickly lost consciousness and the marks quickly disappeared. Stupid Teme. Naruto quickly put his sword back in its sheath and glared down at the unconscious Uchiha after slicing the ice around Sasuke to pieces. If you ever go after my girlfriend again, you'll suffer far worse than that, Teme. As Shino and Choji entered the scene and made the decision to watch Sasuke, Naruto went back to his girlfriend's side and gave her a tight hug, saying, "Sweetie, tell me what happened." A little while later Naruto scowled at everything he had heard. Fortunately, Shikamaru had also woken up, and while Sakura had been telling Team 10 about everything that had happened, especially her boyfriend Naruto, Lee's teammates had arrived to pick him up and vanished without a fight. The blonde couldn't help but feel terrible as she looked into Sakura's eyes. "I'm sorry you had to go through all that, Sakura-chan. Orochimaru was his name, right?" Seeing the pinkette nod slowly, the Uzumaki Namikaze boy sighed again. "Damn. Why in the world is he here? No one has told me anything positive about him. I can't stop wondering what he did to Sasuke and what he wanted with him." "I'm just glad you're alright, sweetie," Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze said, grinning as he gave Sakura another tight hug. "When I noticed the blood in your hair." After giving her boyfriend another kiss and stroking his whiskers, Sakura nodded slowly and said, "I won't abandon you like that, Naruto-koi." The pinkette found herself laughing at her blushing boyfriend as she gave him another tender kiss. "I love you too much to just abandon you." In response, Naruto nodded his head slowly and grinned broadly. "Yeah. Sakura-chan, you make a really good point. On second thought, though, I believe you stated that you required a heaven scroll. We have one more, though. So, this is it. You take it." The blonde reached into his bag, took out the extra heaven scroll belonging to Team 10, and gently placed it in his girlfriend's hands. "I want you three to go straight to the tower when Sasuke wakes up. You should ask to talk to Gigi as soon as Sasuke disappears from view. I'm confident he'll know what to do regarding Orochimaru and that mark." "Don't keep me waiting too long, honey," the pinkette said, nodding slowly before getting up and smiling at her boyfriend. "Get your butt to the tower and grab that earth scroll you need. Can you comprehend me?" "Kami, do I love you," Naruto said, laughing to himself and getting up as well. He kissed Sakura passionately once more before parting ways with her. When Naruto saw his girlfriend nod, he turned to face his teammates, and the three of them swiftly disappeared into the trees to find the earth scroll they required. Tower entrance on the following day. Unfortunately, it was so late in the day that the team had decided it would be best to camp out for the night and head for the tower in the morning, but at the end of the third day, Team 10 had finally succeeded in obtaining the earth scroll they required from a rather feeble team from Kumogakure. Asuma Sarutobi, their sensei, stood in front of them after they had spread out their scrolls at midday and said, "Damn, what the hell took you three so long to get here? 4 days. I believed you to be superior to this." "Our apologies, Asuma-sensei, but there were unexpected circumstances that happened to delay us a fair bit," Shino said before Naruto or Choji could respond. "Yeah, so I've heard," Asuma said, letting out a sigh and nodding to himself while lighting a cigarette and taking a few drags. "Regarding that girl you sent to greet him, the old man wants to talk to you three. And then there's the Uchiha issue. During this second exam, you three were really busy, weren't you?" "Yeah, you could say that," Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head and chuckling a little. "However, would you mind answering a few questions for me, Asuma-sensei?" The sensei of Team 10 laughed and then raised a hand, saying, "I think I know what you're going to ask, Naruto-kun. Sakura-chan is doing well, and Team 7 made it safely. However, she is angry with you for arriving late. After everything they witnessed outside, Team 8 arrived on the second day and has been quite shaken up. You could probably help Ino-chan right now. What about Naruko's team? They arrived yesterday, but from what I understand, they encountered Marco," Asuma Sarutobi said with a sigh and a shake of his head. "Just so you know, Naruko is doing fine," According to what I've been told, he didn't try anything. However, Asuma went on, gazing intently at Naruto. Marco has informed Naruto-chan that he intends to murder you in front of her. Do not hold back Naruto-kun if you must fight him. No matter what it takes, make the punk suffer and ensure that he can't get back up to harm you. When it comes down to it, it's probably a kill or be kill situation. I hate to say that. I understand Asuma-sensei, Naruto said, nodding calmly before patting the Shi no Tachi by his side and glancing down at his feet. I'll probably take him out with my tanto if it comes to that. I have no intention of using this blade against him. I would prefer not to steal his rotten soul and tarnish my sword. Asuma nodded his head and laughed, saying, I can't hold it against you, Naruto-kun. I'd like to let you three know that you passed the second test. Choose a room and rest. There is still another day to go. Asuma sighed as he watched his team pass him and then fixed his gaze on the ceiling. Damn it, why is it that trouble just seems to follow Naruto? He said, at least until my old man comes to speak with you about you know what. 2 hours later in the dining area, fortunately, the Taki team genuinely believed that Fu was dead, and they were unaware of what had happened to the Nanabi. Shortly after discovering a room, the Sandame had knocked on Team 10's door and, predictably, got straight to the point, discussing Fu and the potential repercussions of their actions should Taki discover the truth about what had happened. The Sandame had then informed Naruto that he had fulfilled his request and sent Fu to the Uzumaki Namikaze estate. Kushina had seemingly been unsurprised and had accepted Fu into her home without any serious objections. Hiruzen had persisted in emphasizing the dangers of Naruto's actions, saying that if things went wrong as a result of his choice, the Hokage had no idea what would happen. For a while, they had been talking, but nothing really significant had come up. When Team 10 inquired about Orochimaru and the strange mark on Sasuke, Hiruzen told them to relax and not worry about it, which didn't make them any less anxious, but he insisted that they ignore it, so Team 10 complied with their Hokage's request. As the four of them sat at a table for an early dinner, Naruto asked his girlfriends a question that had been bothering him ever since he had seen Ino earlier, Ino-chan. Seeing that she was listening, Naruto reached over and gave her a gentle squeeze on the hand. What happened? I'm concerned because Asuma-sensei informed me that you were acting strangely. We stumbled upon Gaara and his team, Ino said, putting down her chopsticks, closing her eyes, and shaking her head. Although we hid, I believe he was aware of our presence. All by himself, he killed another team. There was never even a scratch on Gaara. He simply left with Temari and Kankuro, even though he would have killed the four of us as well. It was awful. I see, Naruto said, nodding and closing his eyes. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Ino-chan. The blonde boy gave her hand another comforting squeeze and fell silent for a minute before speaking again. Everything's okay now, Ino-chan, Naruto said, looking his girlfriend in the eyes and grinning sweetly. Don't be ashamed to give up the fight if you must fight him. Don't even take the chance. I'd rather not lose you. The same is true for both of you. Does that make sense? Naruko, his sister and girlfriend, squinted at this point and squeezed Naruto's cheek. How about you, Naruto-kun? When you won't let us fight him, do you think we'll let you? As he so frequently did, the whiskered Jinchuriki rubbed the back of his head and laughed nervously, saying, I'll fight if we end up fighting. I don't want to simply give up, but I also don't intend to die. When he saw his girlfriend's smiles, the blonde Jinchuriki sighed and slowly nodded his head, saying, I'm sorry, sweeties, but I just don't want you three to have to fight Rihashi, Marco, or Gaara. If it gets bad, I'll forfeit the match, I promise. The news is bad. Even though you're all strong, I'm worried, okay? Sadly, their romantic moment was cut short by someone none of Naruto's girlfriends wanted to deal with right now. They all nodded in agreement before moving closer and cuddling up to him. Hello, Dobi. Are you pleased with what you did to me? With a growl in his voice, Sasuke Uchiha posed the question. Evidently annoyed that the Uchiha had cut into their time together, Ino defended her boyfriend by saying, What do you want, Sasuke? Just leave us alone, please. Sasuke turned to Naruto and simply smiled more, saying, After what you did to me, I've decided on something, Dobi. The dark-haired boy simply smirked at Ino. A sinister smirk that truly sent shivers down her spine. I'm going to cause you pain and take away what you value most. Just seems appropriate, don't you think? I don't take kindly to threats like those, Sasuke, Naruto said, his eyes widening a little before he gave him a vile glare. I will put an end to you if you dare attempt anything of that nature. The four lovers watched as Sasuke, who had never responded to Naruto's counter-threat with a single word, walked out of the room, laughing a dark, evil laugh. Naruto-kun, it sounds like he's going to try and pull something to take us away from you. Sakura said, obviously concerned about what Sasuke's threat would mean. He won't succeed, Naruto complained before slamming his fist against the table. The blonde Jinchuriki sighed deeply and buried his face in his hands, saying, let's just try our best to forget about his threat and everything else. We're happy together, and I won't let anyone tear us apart. After enjoying our time together, we ought to go to bed. The exam ends tomorrow, so we'd better be prepared for whatever comes up next. Afterward, the room of Team 10 Naruto was alone in his room, lying in the dark on one of the beds, while his teammates were down in the cafeteria eating their dinner. He was thinking about everything he had heard and seen over the past few days as he stared up at the ceiling when the door creaked open slowly, and he noticed someone trying to enter the room covertly. I wonder who that could be. The blonde soon sensed someone crawling into bed with him, and he knew instantly that it was one of his girlfriends, as the pink hair unmistakably suggested. Naruto put an arm around her and gave her a tender lip kiss before raising an eyebrow. What are you doing, sweetheart? I just really wanted to be with you, Naruto-koi, Sakura said with a sly smile before starting to plant butterfly kisses along her boyfriend's collarbone and shin while running her hands up his chest, under his shirt. Following everything that transpired, I understand Sakura-hime, Naruto said, drawing her on top of him as he heard the melancholy tone in her voice. When the blonde saw her looking at him with curiosity, he started to run his fingers through her hair and then planted a kiss on her forehead. I felt myself falling in love with you even more after seeing you in the forest like that, he said. Sakura-chan, I never want to lose you. After blushing deeply, Sakura Haruno planted another passionate kiss on her boyfriend's lips and leaned closer, whispering in his ear, I want to play around a little while we have time. Naru-kun, you wouldn't turn me away, would you? Don't read. Lime time. Sakura's hands were fumbling with his belt buckle before he could even say anything, and she quickly took off both it and his pants. Naruto drew a shaky breath and grinned at his girlfriend, saying, well, someone is feeling awfully frisky tonight. He could feel one of her hands move slowly inside his boxers. After sensing Sakura's attempt to take off his shirt with her other hand, the blonde took it off for her and then slowly slipped out of his boxers to allow his pink-haired girlfriend unrestricted access to his erect member. Naruto let out a loud gasp as he felt her thumb slide around his cock's head as she started to slowly pump her hand up and down the shaft. Aren't you feeling courageous at the moment? Both of them were experiencing this for the first time, but they were clearly enjoying every second of it. Naruto quickly assisted Sakura in taking off her clothes, revealing her nude in front of him. He changed which of her developing breasts he teased every few minutes while she continued to give him a gentle hand job. The blonde slowly started to move one of his hands up and down her left side while using the other to slowly make circles with one of his fingers around her nipples. Soon after, as Naruto sensed his release approaching, the Jinchuriki moved one hand down to Sakura's firm, round butt and squeezed it, causing her to jump. The blonde then moved his other hand down to her clitoris and started slowly rubbing circles around it, which not only teased her but also greatly aroused her. They were a little sweaty, but they appeared completely at ease with each other and what they had just done, and neither of them was ready for their fun to end just yet. After a few more minutes, the couple released together and lay together panting. It was arousing to watch the pink-haired girl raise her hand and gaze at her boyfriend's sperm for a few seconds before shrugging her shoulders and licking it up, swallowing everything that had gotten on her hand. However, the groans she was causing were unfair to the teenage boy. Sakura smiled and nuzzled into her boyfriend's neck after observing his reaction. It's salty, but it has a distinct flavor, she said. I've never tasted anything like it before. I believe I might come to truly love it. Naru-kun, I know this may be a bit far for us, but I really want to try this, she said, smirking at her boyfriend before straddling him with her face next to his erect member and her dripping honeypot above his face. I want to make you happy and give you pleasure. When his girlfriend let out a rather loud moan, Naruto smirked at her thoughtfulness and slowly slid 2 fingers inside her waiting snatch. Sweetheart, you know we don't have to rush, Naruto said. I appreciate you thinking of me, and I'm having a great time with you, but please don't hesitate to stop and let me know if anything is bothering you, all right? Before licking the tip of Naruto's penis slowly, Sakura hummed softly. The pinkette giggled softly to herself as she felt him shudder beneath her, and then she started to take his penis inside her mouth, which was difficult at first and required her to pull back to the tip every minute or so to catch her breath. Nevertheless, she took more and more of it into her mouth each time she bobbed her head up and down the shaft. As they played with each other's bodies, the two kept groaning loudly. After a little while, Naruto removed his fingers from Sakura's vagina and replaced them with his tongue. Naruto found that he rather enjoyed the taste of his girlfriend's fluids, and after a little more time, he started probing her walls and reveled in the fact that he could make her wriggle during oral sex like this. It didn't take long for them to come again in this way. Sakura, who has always been a loving girlfriend, tried her hardest to swallow her boyfriend's sperm, but she was only able to do so much before pulling back and gagging a little. The remainder of the sperm hit her face and chest, but she didn't care. Instead, the pinkette did what she had done before and started to scoop up her boyfriend's sperm and swallow it as much as she could, washing the remainder off in the restroom as soon as she felt she could stand again. While this was going on, Naruto had been taken a little by surprise and had been splashed in the face a little before he started to lap at her vaginal lips and swallow what he could of his girlfriend's liquids. When they were both done, they curled up together and kissed each other, ignoring the taste of each other on their lips. After catching their breath, they declared their love for one another before Sakura finally had to get up, wash her face and hands, get dressed, and depart. Conclusion of Lime. Safe to reread. The following day, auditorium. All of the passing teams were now waiting for the third exam proctor in a room that resembled an auditorium. The Hokage had just arrived, followed by the proctors and senseis for each passing team, and after addressing the passing genin, the third exam proctor leapt to his feet and started to explain the third exam rules. Several genin cringed and wondered if this man was going to faint and die in front of them every time he coughed, but that didn't hold their interest for long. When Hayate Gecko, the proctor for the third exam, offered the option to quit, not one but 3 people raised their hands. This man looked and sounded extremely ill. That Konoha genin from earlier and Marco's teammates, huh? That seems more than a little suspicious to me. Naruto looked around at the 3 who had made the decision to end their relationship and scowled at what he saw. The teams were told to join their senseis up above after the 3 had departed, and Naruto and his group looked around at the competition, taking in each of them and weighing their chances against them. I know you want to fight Marco, Naruto-kun, Asuma said, reaching down and patting Naruto's shoulder. Recall what I stated. Be cautious, hit hard, and never hesitate if it occurs. He has already made it clear that he wants your blood. After a slow nod, Naruto turned to face the screen and frowned at one of the 2 names that appeared. Sasuke. Yaoi Ikado versus Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke had won, but it had not been an easy fight. Yoroi had used a taijutsu move that Naruto had never seen before, and the blonde shrugged his shoulders when it was all over, watching the Uchiha leave the floor. Not very impressive, Teme, but you've advanced to the final exam, so hurrah for you. Naruto grumbled at that, then returned his focus to the screen. Aburame Shino versus Rihashi. Naruto was extremely concerned about this matchup, but Shino was sure of his skills, so the Uzumaki Namikaze boy allowed his teammate and friend to go to the floor and fight the darkness user. Even though that smile was unsettling, Shino didn't let it show that he was feeling uneasy. Finally, standing across from each other, Shino realized what his friend had meant by what he had said at the end of the first exam. Shino dispersed his Kakaichu and kept a close eye on his opponent as the battle began, but what transpired next was entirely unexpected. The Kakaichu were swiftly engulfed in darkness and consumed by whatever the hell was inside that awful black mass. The Aburame boy immediately made a couple of ordinary clones and jumped to the side to avoid the darkness as his clones moved to either side of the room. Shino stepped back when the darkness followed him, trying to think of just how to fight this opponent. Shino slipped some of his Kakaichu just beneath the floor as the darkness started pursuing his clones, while others slipped around behind his opponent. They attacked from both behind and underneath Rihashi in a single swift motion, but sadly, darkness erupted around his opponent and destroyed even more of the Aburame's Kakaichu. It was looking bad for him, but he didn't want to give up just yet, so he called his Kakaichu back to him and started thinking about what to do next, cursing under his breath. But while Naruto's teammate was pondering, the strangest thing occurred. Rihashi abruptly raised his hand, smirked at Shino, and declared his resignation. Shortly afterward, the darkness using Enigma disappeared from the room, leaving the audience in disbelief. The Aburame boy broke out in a cold sweat and felt tears stinging at his eyes, and when Naruto and Choji appeared at his side, Shino told them both, "I thought I was going to die." Shino fell to his knees and started breathing heavily, not realizing that he had been holding his breath, and his hands soon hit the floor, barely supporting him. I was at a loss for ideas. That shadow. Their sensei knelt down to help Shino through his trauma while the others resumed watching the screen. Shino's teammates helped him back up to where Asuma stood and laid him down against the wall. Kankuro versus Masumi Tsurugi. Overall, this fight had been rather dull for Naruto. Not much had happened, And while Masumi did have an intriguing ability to twist his body in a rather unusual way, Kankuro really gave him a hand in the ass. Ino Yamanaka versus Sakura Haruno. Naruto and his girlfriends were very disappointed in this matchup, so they sat on the floor below and waited for Hayate to declare the start of the match. Sakura then addressed Ino. "I don't want us to fight like this, Ino-chan. You know that. However, let's have the best match possible because I don't want either of us to fail." Ino responded with a slow nod and a tiny smile, saying, "Sakura-chan, I agree. Don't withhold anything." It had been difficult to gain enough experience in their own distinct styles to use them in real combat, but it was well worth the effort. The two best friends soon rushed each other and started battling each other in taijutsu. They were fairly evenly matched, having both developed their own unique taijutsu styles after training so hard with their senseis, Naruto and Kushina Uzumaki. Each time one of them delivered a blow, the other retaliated, and after their taijutsu battle was over, they were both gasping for air and trying to think of a new strategy that would help them win the fight. He couldn't quite tell who would win, but at least he wasn't trying to decide which one he wanted to win. Oh, the trouble that would cause later. Naruto grinned up in the stands as he watched his girlfriends put on a damn good show for everyone around them. The first to come up with a plan was Sakura, who hurled a few shuriken at Ino before starting to practice some hand seals for a jutsu that Kakashi had taught her. After she finished, Sakura kept her right hand by her side and tightly gripped her wrist, and soon after, a strange ball of lightning appeared in her hand. It wasn't big, and it didn't appear to be very strong, but it gave the impression that it would injure something fierce. Kakashi-sensei did teach me another way to use this jutsu, but I'm still learning it. Ino-chan, I hope you're prepared. As Ino threw kunai and shuriken of her own to try and keep Sakura from advancing, the pinkette managed to dodge everything and leapt into the air, quickly swinging her arm back and then thrusting it forward as hard and as fast as she could without hurting herself. Chidori Dangon, 1000 birds projectile. Suddenly the mini Chidori was hurtling toward Ino at a speed that the poor girl simply could not avoid in time. Not at that distance, and the platinum blonde screamed horribly before falling to the ground. After a moment of waiting, Hayate declared Sakura the winner, and everyone watched as Ino was swiftly taken away by the onlookers, who also had a horribly worried expression on their faces as she landed on the floor once more. Ino. Before turning and heading back to her team, the pinkette muttered to herself, "I'm so sorry." The blonde Uzumaki Namikaze boy felt himself torn up inside, and he decided it would be best to just set his feelings aside for the time being. So he turned back to the screen and watched as one of his girlfriends was taken away to be treated while the other seemed to be extremely depressed after hurting her very best friend in the world. Tamari versus Tenten. Tenten lost to Tamari, and although it was quite humiliating for the poor Konoha Kunoichi, the teenage boy felt that she would likely learn from this experience and grow stronger rather than give in to despair or depression. This fight ended rather quickly, and no matter what Tenten tried, none of her attacks even came close to striking her opponent. Naruto felt sorry for the girl and hoped that she didn't take her defeat too hard. Kiba Inuzuka versus Shikamaru Nara. This was actually a pretty interesting matchup. Kiba was a powerhouse, but he didn't use his brain as much as he should have, and Shikamaru was an amazing genius, but he was also incredibly lazy. Shikamaru had tried his best to avoid Kiba and Akamaru's attacks during the battle, but he had undoubtedly suffered some serious damage from the Inuzuka's combination attacks with his pup. The Nara had thought about giving up at one point, but he smiled when he saw something on the ground. He soon trapped Akamaru with his Kagemain no Jutsu, shadow imitation technique, and made the pup punch his master hard, which knocked Kiba to the ground but did not knock him out. The Nara realized he was in trouble when the Inuzuka flew into a rage and started attacking Shikamaru more viciously than before. Choosing to be safe, the Nara raised his hand and declared, "Sorry, but I'm injured as is and I'm not going to let myself get killed trying to win a match where I'm clearly outmatched." No one criticized Shikamaru for his choice, and they all looked to the screen to watch the next match be revealed after the proctor nodded his head and declared Kiba the winner. Upon the announcement of the next match, Naruto's gaze immediately shifted to Marco, who jumped into the ring with a sly grin on his face. The names read, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze vs Marco, clearly on the screen, and Naruto glanced up at his sensei before leaping over the railing and taking his place opposite his opponent, seemingly signaling the start of the battle the two had been anticipating. As he pulled his Ikuryuno aim blades out of their sheaths and assumed a ready stance, Naruto inhaled deeply and exhaled slowly. The young man was aware that he was going to face someone who was out to get him and that he needed to approach the fight with seriousness if he wanted to have any chance of surviving. Naruto then watched as his blades started to glow red after pumping a tiny amount of chakra into them. I just need some solid hits. I'll stop once I've gotten a couple solid hits. If I hit Marco with these babies enough times, he won't be able to stand at all. Marco, who was smirking rather cockily across from him, was obviously confident that he would not only win but also that he would finally get rid of Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the annoyance in his life. Slowly, he reached into one of the pouches on his waistband, pulled out a small paper tag, and waved it up and down. In a mocking tone, Marco questioned, "Remember this?" "I sure do. This baby and 2 others like it were used to restrain you while I nearly got to have my way with that lovely sister of yours. But you just had to use that beast's chakra to overpower them, didn't you, little boy? Still, I bet it burns you up inside that I got to feel up that beautiful sister of yours right in front of you with you being powerless to stop me. Doesn't it, Naruto?" Hearing this conceited son of a bitch discuss almost raping Naruto as if it were some sort of unique conquest caused eyes to narrow and all the women to growl in rage. Hell, many of the men in the audience were also incensed, which, when you consider that some of them weren't the best of people, was really saying something. With all of his fantasies, his obsessive hatred for Naruto, and his lust for Naruto, Marco was obviously deranged. "Once I've done away with you, Naruto's all mine for the taking. She'll be so distraught at the loss of her dear brother that she won't even be able to put up a fight anymore. Once I get it in there, oh man, it'll feel so good. She'll be my personal little cum factory, all for me, and you won't be around to stop me anymore. Oh man, it'll be so fucking fantastic," Marco continued. People in the room were disgusted by this conduct. At the moment, though, Naruto was only interested in one person. Naruto could see his sister crying and giving herself a tight hug as she recalled that terrible moment up in the stands. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man who would soon be dead across from him, but Kuretsuchi tried to console her by putting his arms around her and pulling the redhead's head into her chest. "I hope you've enjoyed your life, Marco. I truly hope you did. Because in a matter of seconds, you're going to lose it. Best prepare yourself, because I'm not going to be holding back, you little shit." With enough of Marco's shit and a sense that the pre-battle banter had lasted too long, Hayate put his hand down and yelled for them to start before jumping back and away from the 2 boys. He disappeared from his position and materialized exactly 2 feet behind Marco, slowly sheathing his tanto as he did so, just as the blonde had predicted. As soon as they clicked into position, his opponent's arms, legs, torso, and entire back were covered in deep gashes. Marco's eyes widened in shock, and the pain he was experiencing was so great that he was unable to scream in agony. It was taking a long time for everything that had just happened to sink in because it was such a shock to his system. Marco turned slowly as blood dripped from his wounds and reached for his pouch to pull out some sort of weapon, but his arm was unresponsive when he tried to will it to move. Not knowing why, he looked in its direction and discovered that his arm had dropped to the ground, cut off from his body as soon as he attempted to move it. He noticed that his left arm, which had been holding the paralysis tag, had also fallen off his body. As Marco opened his mouth to speak, he was startled by the speed at which the ground was approaching. But the fact that the whole room was spinning around and around was what truly perplexed him. Until he saw his body crumpled to the ground a few feet away from where his head now lay, he was at least perplexed. "Oh, I'm dead." The young Uzumaki Namikaze boy turned to face his disfigured opponent and gazed intently into his quickly dwindling eyes. Smirking evilly, Naruto strode over and kicked Marco's head as hard as he could, sending it flying and crashing into the wall at such a high velocity that everyone could hear the loud crunch as the front side of his face collapsed from the pressure at which the head struck the wall. "You weren't even worthy of dying by these blades. Rot in hell, Marco, because that's where you're going for your crimes. Say hi to Kurobi Teme when you get there, would you?" Hayate remained calm and declared Naruto the winner of the match in spite of the gory spectacle. Hayate summoned a cleaning crew to help clear up the enormous mess that Naruto had just created of his opponent after the blonde had gone to his sister's side to assist Kuretsuchi in soothing her. "If anyone were to ask me, I would say that was needless overkill, but the little bastard deserved it." The proctor simply shrugged his shoulders and pondered. Neji Hyuga versus Hinata Hyuga. Naruto wasn't even watching the next battle. To be honest, he didn't give a damn because he was too busy trying to comfort his beloved sister along with Kuretsuchi and Sakura. From the corner of his eye, he could see that Hinata was losing the fight, but she was at least appearing much more self-assured and was fighting fiercely. The blonde ninja embraced his sweetheart tightly, kissed her lips tenderly, and ran his coarse fingers through her long, red hair. Taking his sister's hand, Naruto held it over his heartbeat with both hands, saying, "Sweetheart, look at me. He can't hurt you anymore. That scumbag is gone. I killed him. He can never hurt you or our family again." Kurobi Teme is gone too. Nobody will ever lay a hand on you again. I promise you that as long as you have us around, nobody will ever hurt you like that again. You are safe, Naruko-chan. Please calm down and don't cry anymore. Seeing you like this hurts. It hurts me so bad right here. I love you, Naruko-chan. More than you could ever know. Don't let what he said hurt you anymore, okay? Naruko wiped away her tears with the backs of her left hand's fingers and began to smile as she nodded her head slowly while holding on to her brother's shirt. Looking at her friends Kuretsuchi and Sakura, Naruko turned to them both and gave them quick embraces. You're right, Naruto-kun. Thank you so much for everything. I love you so much. Thank you both as well for being here for me. Sakura hugged Naruko back, and Kuretsuchi shrugged and patted her back. As she cracked her knuckles with a sadistic grin on her face, the Iwakunoichi said, No problem, Naruko-chan. It just sucks that I didn't get a chance to kick that guy's ass before Naruto-kun got to him. I would have loved to have roasted that punk's balls for the shit he was saying about you. Naruto shifted slightly and chuckled nervously, hoping he would never face her wrath. When they heard a scream coming from the arena below, they were all startled out of their reverie. Neji was on the ground, writhing in agony from whatever attack his cousin had just used on him. When they looked down, how could Hinata have pulled off a come-from-behind victory like this when Naruto had her on the ropes the last time he saw her? He wished that he had been listening more at this point. In spite of this, he cheered for her and raised his fist in the air. All right, Hinata. Congrats on your victory. As Hinata made her way back to the top level, her teammates and friends applauded her victory as well. In the meantime, the medical staff carried Neji away to receive treatment for his internal wounds. The severity of whatever Hinata had done to him was such that blood was dripping down his chin and pooling up in his mouth. Naruto understood that if he wasn't careful, the once apprehensive Hyuga might turn out to be a formidable opponent and a serious threat in the championship match. Rock Lee vs. Gaara. Naruto wanted to give this fight his whole attention. Therefore, the blonde stepped to the guardrails and listened intently to both of these potential future opponents while holding the hands of his two girlfriends beside him. He was confident that Gaara would win this match, though, despite this. The young man knew something was wrong, but he also knew that his assessment was probably accurate when the game started. Lee showed no signs of ever attempting any other ninja techniques. He was only practicing taijutsu. Naruto thought it must have been this guy after it was confirmed that he could only use taijutsu. He recalled hearing about a boy who was a year older than him and who was permitted to pass because of exceptional circumstances or something. He shrugged his shoulders and kept watching the match, curious to see what someone who was only using taijutsu could actually do to such a strong opponent. The green-clad boy simply kept impressing with his amazing strength and speed as the fight went on. But in the end, it was all for nothing because Gaara's sand armor turned out to be almost impenetrable. It was ultimately not meant to be, but Lee had managed to crack it with some pretty hard blows. The Suna ninja won because the poor boy had exhausted himself and sustained a career-ending injury to both his left arm and leg before his sensei stepped in to help him. Against Naruko Uzumaki Namikaze, Choji Akamichi. As Choji descended into the arena, he found himself gulping uneasily at this matchup. He was aware of Naruko's intense desire to join her cousin as a Chunin, so he anticipated that this battle would be difficult and could potentially result in his defeat. To tell the truth, he was tempted to give up immediately in order to escape the serious beating he knew was imminent. He knew she wouldn't hold back, even though he was close friends with the sister of his friend and teammate. I'm in serious trouble. Naruko, however, was ecstatic. Finally, it was her turn to engage in combat. With a big smile on her face, she jumped over the railing and landed a short distance from her boyfriend, giving him a big hug and kiss on the cheek. The beautiful redhead pulled out her daggers and pumped some sweetened chakra into them, shaping them into hook swords out of water. Let's have a good fight, Choji-kun. You should know that I plan to win though, she said. Okay, Mr. Proctor Man, I'm ready now. With a quick glance between the two combatants, Hayate lifted his hand and slashed it down. Begin, he said, leaping back out of the way to allow the two of them to get started. Suddenly, Naruko was in front of Choji, one of her hook swords made of water around his neck. She moved her hand so that the hook caught around the portly boy's neck and pulled him straight into Naruko's raised knee, confusing her opponent before he could move to dodge the attack. She whirled around and slammed the back of her left fist into Choji's left side of the face, sending him flying to the ground. She watched him skid until his back struck the wall. Shino and Naruto couldn't help but feel sorry for their teammate on the balcony, but despite Naruto's desire to support him, he knew he couldn't support his sister or girlfriend. The young Uzumaki Namikaze heir found this match extremely difficult to watch, so he decided to just keep quiet and watch it through to the end. Instead of moaning in agony, Choji swiftly used his own jutsu, the partial multi-size technique, and hurled his rapidly growing left leg out in an effort to crush Naruto against the distant wall. He quickly shrunk his leg and, after calling out the technique's name, threw out his right fist and enlarged it as well after she rolled out of the way. Choji had to stop the technique early because Naruto had to dodge again, but this time she cut into his arm with her hook sword. Choji, having run out of options, yelled, "Multi-size technique," and rolled his entire body into a huge ball before yelling, "Human bullet tank," and rolling straight toward Naruto, hoping to crush her with his enormous girth. The long-haired redhead quickly flipped her opponent over, then swung her right leg out and kicked with a chakra-enhanced kick that sent her opponent flying into the wall across from her. Instead of just remaining there, though, he turned around and charged at her again with her back to him. The frustration of not being able to put Choji down quickly made Naruto scoff, "TCH." Nevertheless, she had to give him credit. There was no doubt that the child had enduring power. Naruto became tired of it and slipped away her daggers before removing her sealing equipment, avoiding Choji's attempts to crush her every time he changed direction. "That's it, Choji. You've ticked off an Uzumaki, and that calls for something a little special. I hope you're prepared for some pain, my friend." Naruto slapped 3 paper tags around her in a triangle with a sly smile on her face before yelling, "Seal." When a pyramid-shaped barrier appeared around her, Choji was forced to cancel his technique and complain in exasperation, realizing that he was now in serious trouble. Now that she had some time to herself, Naruto started writing a beautiful, complex seal onto a blank paper tag while Choji took a food pill to refuel his chakra. With a devilish smirk on her face, Naruto held up her seal for the younger genin to see when she had finally finished it. "I hope you're ready, Choji boy. 'Cause this is going to be the tool that leads to your defeat." Choji nodded slowly and watched as Naruto's barrier came down, letting out a seemingly resigned sigh. The young man advanced swiftly and engaged Naruto in a ferocious taijutsu duel, both of them avoiding each other's blows and not advancing on the other. Every time Naruto attempted to slap Choji with the sealing tag, he would barely avoid it, and every time Choji was about to hit Naruto, she would deftly dodge it with her slender body moving in ways that no man could. When Choji finally overextended during a punch, his opponent used the moment to slap the tag on his chest and yell, "Seal of depletion. Seal." Choji screamed in pain as he felt a significant portion of his chakra being quickly drawn into the seal. Fortunately, the process was not fatal, but it was painful. The young genin's eyes rolled into the back of his head, and when it was finally over, he fell to his knees. Naruto gave him a gentle pat on the head, smiled sweetly, and quickly tore the seal off his chest. Before leaving to join her cherished brother, Naruto said sweetly, "You put up an amazing fight, Choji boy. Be proud, my friend." Hayate declared that Kuretsuchi would be permitted to pass without having to fight since there would be no more opponents for her to compete against, which somewhat disappointed her. This came after declaring Naruto the winner and observing Choji being taken away to have his wounds attended to. When he called the winners down, she still understood and joined the other genin on the arena floor. They were told that in order to decide who would face whom in the finals, they would have to draw lots. Thus, each genin reached into a box that Anko was carrying. They started reading off their numbers sequentially after it was finally over. Sasuke smirked haughtily and said, 7. Shino held up his number and said, 6. When Kankuro flashed his number to the proctors, he said, 4. According to Sakura, I'm number 9. 11. Tamari shrugged her shoulders. With Akamaru joyfully barking on top of his head, Kiba said, 2. Naruto grinned and glanced at Kiba before saying, 1. Hinata was smiling softly as she said, 8. Gaara's usual blank monotone was used to say, I've got 3. With excitement, Naruto declared, I have number 5. Shrugging, Kuretsuchi said, number 10. Once they had listed all of their numbers, Enko said, okay, that's all of them. When the proctors were done writing the names on the board, they turned it over to show the others. They all looked at the person they would be competing against in the finals before turning to face their opponents with expressions that ranged from excitement to concern. Match 1. Kiba Inuzuka vs Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Gaara vs Kankuro in Match 2. Match 3. Shino Aburame vs Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Match 4. Hinata Hyuga vs Sasuke Uchiha Sakura Haruno vs Kuretsuchi in Match 5. Tamari advances to the second round, where she will face the victor of Match 5. The group of genin were then dismissed and led back through the Forest of Death and out of the tower until they reached the village proper. Once there, Naruto stopped Kuretsuchi and his girlfriends, Sakura and Naruto. Following a few tentative but interested nods from the group, they started to head towards the Konoha hospital, each of them unsure of exactly what Naruto needed to tell them. Girls, I kinda need to talk to you three about something. But first, we need to go visit Ino in the hospital, okay? She needs to hear this too, okay? 20 minutes later, in Ino's room at Konoha Hospital. While his girlfriends attempted to soothe him, Naruto could be heard complaining angrily as they entered Ino's hospital room. Kuretsuchi chose to ask her question because she was interested in it. Okay, seriously here, what the fuck was that woman's problem? All we wanted to know was her room number, but all she could do was give Naruto-kun a fucking death glare and tell him to get lost. Naruto walked over, closed the door, and sat down next to Ino's bed, scowling. She's one of the bigots, Kuretsuchi-chan. You already know that I hold the Kyuubi. Well, some people don't appreciate the fact that I'm just the container and view me as the beast itself. They hate me and wish me nothing but ill will. So far, nobody's ever actually tried anything, but that doesn't stop them from being assholes. Kuretsuchi approached him and put a hand on his shoulder, frowning at this. If it helps any, Roshi and Han aren't exactly treated very well either. They're the Jinchuriki back in Iwa, and, well, they're treated more like weapons than anything. I've never treated them as anything but people, but I'm in the minority. I'm in your corner, Naruto, and I'll never treat you as anything less than human. You're a good guy and you've been nothing but sweet to me. The black-haired girl leaned in and gave him a quick peck on the cheek, making his girlfriends in the room envious. Naruto held his hand up to his cheek, blushing slightly. He was starting to question whether Kuretsuchi was merely making fun of him or if she truly felt something for him, because this wasn't the first time she had shown him affection. Naruto chose to shake his mind of such thoughts and concentrate on the reason he had brought them here. Thank you, Kuretsuchi-chan. But that's not important right now. Still though, I do hope things improve for those two. He expressed sincere hope that his fellow Jinchuriki and Iwagakure would also experience an improvement in their circumstances. But once more, he had more important things to talk about. At least for the time being. I'm afraid that I kinda did something that you girls might not be too happy with me about. Upon noticing their curious looks, Naruto chuckled uneasily before moving around the room and placing silencing seals to ensure that his words would remain there. He returned to Ino's bedside after finishing and grinned at her and the others. During the exams, I encountered a fellow Jinchuriki named Fu from Takigakure. We talked for a bit, and I found out that she was being used by her village as a means to help her teammates become Chunin. She was never going to be promoted even if she went all the way to the end and won the damn tournament at the end. Fu's been abused back in her village and things haven't been good for her. Observing the furious expressions on their faces, the heir of Uzumaki Namikaze nodded his head and continued his explanation. Naruto smirked and made a small bow when the girls laughed at his new moniker, the Teme. I was meaning to tell all of this to you girls back in the tower, but Uke Teme interrupted us. Thank you, thank you. I'm glad you like the new name. Enough of that though, I have something important to say. Naruto sighed and concluded that it would be best to just end it. The 14-year-old blonde started to laugh nervously and scratch at the side of his nose. Together with my teammates, we knocked out her teammates and proceeded to fake Fu's death. We escorted her out of the Forest of Death and I asked Anko to see her to the Sandaime Hokage so she could request sanctuary here in the village before, I kind of decided she would be living with me from now on here in the village. The blonde man said this, then closed his eyes and waited for the cries of indignation he sensed were imminent. He felt he made the right choice in the end, even though he knew he deserved his girlfriend's ire for making such a choice without first consulting them. He wasn't prepared for 3 sets of arms to embrace him while another hand patted his head. He asked the question on his mind while blinking a few times in shock and looking around at Kuretsuchi and his girlfriends. You aren't mad at me? They all shook their heads in agreement, so Ino made the decision to speak up for everyone. Naruto, honey, we aren't mad exactly. We're unsure of what to think of her living with you, but we're happy you did the right thing and helped her out of that horrible situation she was stuck in. If you feel that her living with you is the safest thing for her right now, then we'll have to trust in your decision. But I think we should all come over to your place and have a little chat to make sure she understands something first, before we're really okay with her living with you. Understand? Naruto nodded his head quickly, gulping a little. After receiving nods from everyone, Naruto smiled and left with Sakura to get a doctor so they could get Ino released from the hospital. Message read, loud and clear, sweetheart. Girls need to have a talk and the guy will stay out of it. We'll get the doctor to release you and then we can head on over to my place in a bit. Sound good to everybody? She was only there for a brief period of time because she had already recovered from some electrical damage to her nervous system by the time they got there. Medical ninjutsu would continue to amaze people. Uzumaki Namikaze compound. An hour later, the group knocked on the door of the Uzumaki Namikaze residence to let Kushina know they had arrived. They never would have imagined that Zabuza would be holding a broom and opening the door while wearing a frilly made uniform. Naruto's jaw dropped as he looked up into his eyes, and he couldn't control the question that escaped his lips. Zabuza-sensei? What the fuck, man? Zabuza moaned to himself, opened the door for the group, slammed it behind them, and then turned to glare at each of them individually. As he continued to moan, the formidable swordsman maid practically snarled, "I swear to Kami that if any of you laugh, I'll make your training sue much harder, Naruto. You won't be able to stand after I'm through with you. Your mother is a freaking sadist. Making me wear this damn thing around the house all day, all because I told her she was the damn devil in disguise. The way she wields that frying pan, you'd think she was more monster than woman." The group decided to leave the rambling swordsman maid to his duties after sweat dropping, and they went off to find Kushina and Fu so they could have their little talk. The group tried to ignore Zabuza's crazy digression as they left. They didn't want to be around the poor man as he drew closer to his breaking point because they felt that whatever sanity he did have was quickly evaporating due to Kushina's sadism. After all, no one wanted to be present when a man in a maid costume broke down. Upon entering the living room, they heard a conversation going on and saw the Uzumaki matriarch and her guest sipping tea and engaging in conversation. However, Fu put down her teacup and hurried to Naruto as soon as she saw him. She threw her arms around him and gave him a tight hug in a matter of seconds. Thank you so much, Naruto-kun, for saving me like that and inviting me to your home. Your mother is wonderful and your home is beautiful. Although that Zabuza person is kind of weird. I mean, what kind of man wears a maid uniform?" Naruto chuckled uneasily at this, unable to avoid looking at his mother and the malevolent grin she had put on in response to this query. "I really don't think it's by choice, Fu-san." Fu took a step back from Naruto and prodded his nose before he could continue. "Nope, call me Fu-chan. I won't have you calling me anything else, Naruto-kun." The girls around Naruto seized Fu, pulled her away from him, and practically snarled at her before Fu could say or do anything else, just like she did with Naruto. Ino, who was obviously already not fond of this Fu person, stated, "No flirting with our guy. We're going to lay some ground rules here if you're going to be living with Naruto-kun, Missy." "First off," Sakura said, "no flirting with him. Naruto already has 3 girlfriends that he's more than happy with. He doesn't need any more than that." Naruto shushed her with a finger before Fu could interrupt. "Second, you are not to sneak into his room at night. You seem like you might try that, so don't do it. Understand me?" Fu remained silent, listening on, blinking in confusion at these rules. For a while, they just kept going in this manner, enumerating rule after rule until she eventually had enough. Fu walked past the 4 young women and went straight up to Naruto, grabbing his crotch through his pants before speaking her mind. "I understand that you don't want me to pursue your man. Well, tough molasses. He saved me. He's cute, he has a great personality, and he already has 3 girlfriends, which tells me he's in an open relationship. Sue, you see this, ladies? This is gonna be mine." Kushina finally lost her temper at this point and spat her tea all over the table in front of her just before she burst out laughing. The fact that Kuretsuchi rushed over to Naruto, took hold of his arm, and dragged him away from Fu didn't make things any better. Kuretsuchi leaned in and gave her beloved Naruto-kun her most passionate kiss, saying, "No it isn't, damn it. Naruto-kun's going to be my boyfriend. I'm tired of trying to hide my feelings for him, and I'm not about to let some hussy get to him before I do." Naruto blushed intensely and then fell backwards in a faint with swirling eyes and a hanging mouth when Kuretsuchi withdrew from the kiss and licked her lips sensuously. As soon as possible, the girls gathered around him and started attempting to check on him. Throughout, Kushina couldn't resist slapping her knee and laughing even louder than before. "I promise you, Kami, my son has the most hilarious luck." Later that night, in order to prevent the 5 girls from destroying her house, Kushina had finally broken up a rather large catfight that had started over her son. In the end, they had agreed to have a more thorough conversation about their feelings for Naruto after they had all calmed down and had had time to consider their options. As of right now, Ino and Sakura had left for their houses, and Naruto, Naruko, Fu, and Kuretsuchi were sleeping in their rooms following a long day and, so far, a very taxing Chunin exam. Their frustrating period of rest and relaxation was unfortunately coming to an end. and Anbu was standing in front of Kushina when she opened her front door after hearing a knock once more. Yes? Is there something I can help you with? The Anbu clarified, Ma'am, Kushina-sama, after observing the expression on the Uzumaki woman's face when she was addressed as ma'am. Your son and his girlfriends have been called before the council. I have been sent to retrieve your children. I think it might be a good idea for you to come as well. I don't think this is likely to be a pleasant meeting for them. With the same sense of dread as the female Anbu member on her doorstep, Kushina frowned and nodded in agreement. Kushina went upstairs and gathered everyone she thought would be needed for the meeting, Naruto, Naruko, Fu, and Kuretsuchi, after inviting the woman inside. Following their explanation of the circumstances, Naruto and Naruko exchanged nods before turning to face their mother. Mom, I think I know what this is about. If I'm right, we might just have to kill ourselves at Teme. Inquisitive but unwilling to put things off any longer, Kushina just nodded her head and used the body flicker technique to lead the group to the council chambers with the Anbu. If her son and his girlfriends were being called before the council of Konoha, then whatever was happening had to be pretty serious. Chambers of the council Ino and Sakura were waiting for the group when they entered the council chambers. They then joined the two of them in the middle of the room and looked around at all the faces until they came across one that made them all frown. Sasuke Uchiha's. He was standing with a few members of the civilian council instead of his mother, though, indicating that he was using them to obtain something that clearly didn't benefit our group of protagonists. The seven of them turned to the Hokage and listened to him as he spoke. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes and glared at the haughty boy who was now grinning smugly at Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, as if he had already won this battle. I'm sorry to call you here when you were most likely resting after such a trying time in the Chunin exams. However, something has come to the attention of the council and they would like to discuss it with you. All thanks to a certain nuisance. At this point, Makoto made the decision to inform them of the situation as tactfully as possible. Naruto-kun, my son, she said in an angry voice, has brought news to the council of Konoha that you've been seeing more than one young lady in a romantic sense. He has it in his head that he can have his way here and get them taken away from you, in fact. A plump civilian councilman interrupted Makoto at this point, grinning haughtily at the 14-year-old Uzumaki Namikaze heir. Sasuke-sama has been inducted into the CRA and has chosen to take all of your precious girlfriends, plus any others you might have, as his brides. What do you say to that, you little brat? The man started having a heart attack after Kushina directed a great deal of killing intent at him in a matter of seconds. After the deed was completed, it didn't take long for him to fall to the ground and for her to smile contentedly. In case you bastards forgot, my son is the heir to the Uzumaki name and is currently the only male Uzumaki in the village. In fact, it's quite possible that he's the last male Uzumaki in the world. Therefore, he qualifies for the CRA as well, and thus is allowed multiple wives. On top of that, he has been dating Ino-chan and Sakura-chan for years, while Naruko-chan and he have been dating for a matter of months now. And before you get it in your heads to say anything about incest being wrong, keep in mind that incest is practiced in other clans as well. And our Uzumaki genes would cancel out any genetic defects that might result as a product of birthing a child between my two children. Any questions? Sasuke became enraged at this point before he had another thought that might enable him to harm the Uzumaki Namikaze heir he so hated. He put his idea in the woman's ear and stepped closer to one of the civilian councilmen he knew was on his side. The woman continued talking after he was done. I can't help but notice that you didn't say anything about the two girls standing there. I believe that one is named Kuretsuchi-san, but the other I don't recognize. It doesn't matter, the point stands. Sasuke would like to take them as his brides if Naruto-san hasn't laid claim to them yet, the elected official replied. Naruto made the decision to speak up in response to this. First off, Kuretsuchi-chan isn't a member of our village. She's here as part of a system to try and foster peace between the different hidden villages, and therefore is exempt from this shit that the Teme is trying to pull. Secondly, Fu isn't interested in the Teme, and nobody has any right to claim her as if she's some kind of object. Thirdly, they both have the right to be with whomever they choose to be with. From what I understand of the CRA, you can't force people to be with you. Instead, they have the freedom of choice. Therefore, all of this is complete bullshit and you civilians that have a problem with me can effectively suck it. In response, Kushina gave her son a backhand slap on the head. Watch your language, mister. I've warned you about this before. I don't care if they're in the wrong here, you will behave like a proper gentleman in front of your mother or else you'll be in trouble with me later. Naruto nodded his head and turned to face his grandfather figure, laughing a little uncomfortably at this. Gigi, because the Teme decided to pull this stunt, Can we just slap the old CRA on me and call it a day? I'm bushed after such a long day, and I don't want something like this happening again. Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded his head and gave a quiet laugh. The elderly man shook his head in frustration and let out a soft sigh after observing a shrug of the shoulders as his response to the question. Of course, Naruto-kun. But do you really understand what you're asking for here? You will have to take a certain number of wives as determined by us and have to birth at least one child by a set date. Can you agree to these terms? Naruto frowned at this, turned to face his girlfriends, and after they had spoken to each other, got a tentative nod in return. If my girlfriends have accepted the idea, then I can as well. It won't be easy, but we agree, Gigi. Hiruzen nodded, then looked around the room, listening to the shinobi and civilian council members whispering to each other. He looked down at it and shrugged when everyone had finally reached a consensus and handed him their judgment on paper. Taking everything into account, it wasn't a bad amount. Alright, Naruto-kun, it looks like it isn't so bad. The council has come to the decision that you are to accrue at least 6 wives and birth one child by your 17th birthday. Do you agree to these terms? His girlfriends nodded in agreement when he asked them what they thought, but their expressions also suggested that they would need to discuss this with him once they were out of here. Naruto turned back to his grandfather figure and gave a resolute nod. Yes, Gigi, we accept. Hiruzen nodded again, then grinned and waved his hand. He said in a firm voice, then this council meeting is over. Everyone is dismissed. Get out of here. Makoto noticed the glance Naruto was giving her as she got up from her seat. It was a look that said, we need to talk. She nodded and left the council meeting chambers to wait for him. Naruto scowled as he turned to face his girls after Makoto had left. After taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes and braced himself for the worst. Sweethearts, I need to ask you something. Would you be okay if I asked Makoto-chan to be one of my brides? Now that the Teme has been inducted into the CRA, it's only a matter of time before he realizes that, well, his mother is fair game, so to speak. She's a pure-blooded Uchiha, and you know how he is. And before you ask, I'm not just asking this because I want to keep her safe from him. I've had a crush on Makoto-chan for years. It felt awkward, you know? Naruko gave her brother a hug and a cheek kiss while giggling. Honey, I've known about your crush on Makoto Obasan for years. I want to keep her safe from that jerk too. It would be weird for a while to have an older woman in the mix, but she's such a sweetheart that I know she would never mistreat you, Naruto-kun. If you want to be with her, well, I won't deny you. What about you girls? When Naruko moved away from her boyfriend, Ino approached and gave him a firm embrace. Sweetie, it's okay. I don't want Makoto-san to suffer at the hands of that monster. He's already tried to take us away from you, and I don't know what else he might try to do. From what you've told us, he already treats his mother like dirt. I can't even imagine what it would be like if she was forced to lay with him like that. You go and talk to her, try to convince her to be with you, sweetheart. We're willing to allow her into our little harem, if you want to call it that. Naruto turned to face his mother and gazed into her eyes while nodding. Mom? Are you okay with this? Makoto-chan is your very best friend after all, and this has to be weird for you? Kushina frowned and reached down to give her son a gentle but firm embrace. Kushina gave her son a shove toward the doors and watched as he staggered through them while giggling. Sweetheart, it's okay. It might be weird to consider, but if you're willing to help her out of a fate worse than death like this, then I can deal with the awkwardness of it. Now don't keep her waiting for you any longer. I saw the look you sent her. Get out there and talk to her. Kushina turned back to the 5 girls in front of her as soon as Naruto left the room. So how do you really feel about all of this? All of their shoulders drooped in despair and resignation as they sighed. Ino, obviously annoyed by everything that had just happened, yelled, honestly. This kinda sucks. I can't believe that asshole would pull such a thing. Actually, yes I can. He's definitely the type to do whatever he can to try and hurt our precious Naruto-kun. Sakura, gazing at the doors her beloved had just left through, spoke up at this moment. To be perfectly honest, I was trying to get used to the idea of sharing him with Kuretsuchi-san and Fu-san. Now I have to share him with an older woman too. I'm not sure how to feel. But, I don't want Makoto-san to suffer. On top of that, I want Naruto-kun to be happy. So. As she held Sakura and Ino close to her, Naruko remarked, you're right, Sakura-chan. I feel the same way. It will just take some getting used to, that's all. Naruko scowled at her teammate for a moment before approaching and giving her a hug. Kuretsuchi-chan, I'm sorry about giving you such a hassle before about liking my brother. If he makes you happy, then I'm happy for you. Just try not to hog him to yourself, got it? Kuretsuchi nodded her head and gave Naruto a hug in return, giggling a little. She explained, feeling relieved that her best friend was finally willing to give her a chance. I won't. If we're going to be sharing the same guy, we need to truly share him. Equal opportunity and all that. I like how you did things before, all spending time with him equally and even group dates sometimes. I'd like to try and make this work, group dates and all. Conversely, Fu was overjoyed. She let out a loud cheer and threw her fist in the air. Fu winced and started to whine in pain as she felt her ear being pinched and pulled on. Woohoo! I'm being given a chance. I hope you know I'm still determined to be the first one he sleeps with though, she exclaimed. Ow ow! Let go, let go. Stop it, please. Kushina squinted and scowled down at the girl she was holding. After receiving a terrified nod in response, the older woman smiled brightly and let go of the young girl with the mint hair. Fu, what did I tell you earlier? You are to behave and act like a good girl when around my son. I understand that you're eager, but you will not rush into anything. You will get to know each other, and if it happens, it will happen naturally and without pressure from either side. Is this understood? Good. I'm so glad we could come to an understanding. Alongside Naruto saw Makoto smiling as she waited for him just to his left as soon as he exited the meeting rooms. The young blonde walked up to her, grinning sheepishly, rubbed the back of his head, and made the decision to tell her he was sorry for keeping her waiting. Sorry for making you wait for me, Makoto-chan. I hope you weren't waiting too long. I had to talk to my girlfriends about something. It's okay, Naruto-kun. You didn't keep me waiting at all. What was it that you wanted to talk with me about? The Uchiha matriarch said, laughing to herself as she shook her head and grinned sweetly down at the younger man. Naruto looked her in the eyes and tried to calm himself for what he was going to say, blushing a little at this point. On the inside, though, he was a nervous mess. After all, asking an older woman to marry you isn't something you do very often. In an attempt to relax, Naruto took a deep breath and let it out gradually. Looking up into Makoto Uchiha's eyes at this point, Naruto gently took one of her hands and started making circles on the back of it with his thumb. Makoto-chan. My mom told me before about the CRA. She said that if I was put into it, I might have to bed either her or Naruto-chan for purebred children, so to speak. Or at least that it wouldn't be frowned upon. Makoto-chan. I'm worried about you, really worried. Makoto frowned, gathered her beloved Naruto-kun in an embrace, and planted a kiss on his head. Naruto-kun, it'll be okay. I wouldn't let my son touch me in that way, I promise you that. Besides, I doubt he'd ever try anything. Is that all you were worried about? Naruto shook his head, seized both of her hands, and gazed intently into her eyes. Makoto-chan, you don't understand. As the last members of the Uchiha clan, it's expected of you too. Naruto shook his head once more and attempted to calm himself down, practically growling to himself at this point. Makoto-chan, I've had such a crush on you for so many years now. I don't want the Teme to touch you. He doesn't respect you, he doesn't treat you well, and he doesn't even act like you're his mother, for crying out loud. He's a self-entitled little shit that will only use you as a baby-making factory and then throw you away when you don't have any use to him anymore. Now that he was done, Naruto was panting heavily and could see that Makoto was upset by his words as he gazed into her eyes. Naruto did the only thing that came to mind at this moment, his eyes full of unshed tears. He put his hands lightly on Makoto's cheeks, then leaned in to give her a gentle peck on the lips. Makoto was initially in complete shock that she was being kissed by a younger man, Naruto, of all people. However, she closed her eyes and started kissing him back after a brief pause. To be completely honest, this action felt so good and right to her that she couldn't help but give in to it completely because it had been so long since someone had done something like that with her. Makoto slowly put her arms around Naruto's neck and kissed him more deeply while using her tongue to probe his mouth. After letting her in, they started playing tongue games and probing each other's mouths until their need for air got the better of them and they had to part ways. Makoto looked away from him as she brought her hands to her cheeks and started to panic, blushing violently at what she had just done. Oh dear me, what did I just do? Naruto turned Makoto back to him and gently took her hands in his. Makoto-chan, I have feelings for you. I want to not only keep you safe from your son, but I want you to be with me as one of my future brides. Will you give me a chance? A fierce blush spread across Makoto's face, and she felt as though her brain might explode at any moment. She tried to calm herself by shaking her head from left to right several times, but she could tell Naruto was taking her gesture negatively and hurried to stop him. Naruto, do you know what you're asking of me? I'm more than twice your age. Why would you want someone like me when you already have such beautiful young women after your heart? Naruto scowled a little, then leaned in to give Makoto another quick kiss before starting to rub circles on the backs of her hands once more. I already told you, Makoto-chan. I've had feelings for you for the longest time. I just never came forth with them because I felt that you would reject me. But now, I don't want to lose you. I want you to be with me, Makoto-chan. Please? The stunning Ravenette took a few deep breaths to try to relax, then she gazed into her young friend's eyes and gradually found herself nodding. I'll give this a chance. Give us a chance. But, will your girlfriends accept me? I'm so much older than the rest of them. Naruto leaned in and planted another gentle yet passionate kiss on her lips while grinning sweetly at her. His beloved's face was redder than ever before he withdrew, and she was grinning contentedly. Naruto hugged her tightly and whispered in her ear, "That's what I was talking to them about before coming out here. They're willing to accept you, Makoto-chan. All you had to do was say, yes. Thank you for saying yes." Makoto then put her arms around the younger man and gave him a cheek kiss. "You're welcome, Naruto-kun. Thank you for caring so much about me. I'm actually a little anxious to see how this works out. I'm old and haven't had any experience in the dating game in ages." Naruto gave Makoto a gentle chuckle, shook his head, and jabbed at his forehead. She nodded in agreement, her smile growing wider, and Naruto took her hand before walking with her to rejoin the others. "Stop saying you're old, Makoto-chan. You're still a beautiful woman with a lot of life left to live. I think we're going to have a lot of fun dates and a lot of good times together. Just you wait and see." He was eager to find out what the future held for each of them.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.